All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this bright and early Friday. And Mr. Jockers, over to you.
Thank you very much, Clerk Moss. Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. You can see the agenda that we have put together, and I'm really excited because it's exactly 9 o'clock and we are getting going. So, yes, Chair. Yeah, we're going to do introduction, but yeah, should we do roll call? Certainly we could do that.
This is a really important meeting.
So I'll go ahead and
The Clean Water Services Fiscal Year 2023-24 Budget Committee meeting today, Friday, May 5th, 2023. And we have
Representative.
Pam Trees, Board of Directors, Clean Water Services.
Matt Wellner, ACWAC representative.
Alex Mann, CWAC representative.
Catherine Harrington, Board of Director, elected member.
Terry Song, CWAC chair.
Jerry Willie, Board of Directors, Clean Water Services.
Mark Jockers, Chief of Staff, Clean Water Services.
Kathleen Leader, CFO, Clean Water Services. Diane Taniguchi-Dennis, Chief Executive Officer, Clean Water
Great.
Services.
So we got the official roll call for this public meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. It is, and part of the context there is this is streaming live on both the Clean Water Services YouTube channel as well as the Washington County YouTube channel, and I'm certain we're going viral here. So, and we have Director Fye has joined us. I also would like the opportunity to introduce some of the staff that will be presenting here this morning, or actually ask the staff to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Erin Lowry over there. If you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, Erin Lowry. I'm the district's finance manager.
Jody?
Who keeps me out of trouble in all these meetings?
Oh my goodness, she keeps me out of trouble every day. So. Thank you very much. And Commissioner Fye, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Excuse my late walk-in. I'm here. I was thinking I might be online. Kevin, thank you for being flexible for both. So I wasn't sure which one is going to happen today, but I made it in. I'm here. Good to see you. Good to be here.
She's on the Board of Directors, elected Board of Directors member. And we may have Roy Rogers joining us at some point as well.
Yes, Director Wright. So our Budget Committee is composed of our 5 Board of Directors and 5 members that are recommended from our Advisory Commission. And we have 9 of them present here, and Director Rogers is scheduled to join us later. Just a couple of things. Your microphones can go on and off. You can see them right here. Some of you are sharing microphones. I'm sharing one with Kathy. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kathy, our Chief Financial Officer.
Good morning. I'm also here today represented as the Budget Officer for Clean Water Services. So I'm starting the first action here for the meeting today, and that is the election of the presiding officer that's going to oversee the meeting today. Do I have a nomination?
I would love to be able to nominate Terry Song as the chair of our Budget Committee.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? So, Pam, second. Okay. All right. Any discussion or further nominations from the committee?
Mr. Song, would you be willing to serve?
I would.
Oh, good. Phew.
Well, hearing no other discussion or other recommendations, do I have a aye for all in favor of Terry Song as our chair of today's meeting?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, we have a new assigned chair presiding over our meeting today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair Song. We already did that. All right, so today's budget was prepared by Clean Water Services in compliance with Oregon budget law. And for the committee here today, the purpose of the meeting is for the committee to receive the budget message, to hear any public comment, and the final action will be deliberation and approval of the budget for Clean Water Services for fiscal year 23-24. This action will then be taken to the board in June for a public hearing. So once again, we'll hear public comment, and they will adopt our final budget for fiscal year end 23-24. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Diane Taniguchi-Dennis.
Thank you and good morning. Welcome. We're glad to have you all here and our audience joining us today. I'm going to share with you 3 business drivers that really drove our budget for this year. The very first budget driver is our business environment driver. So there is increased competition for talent to be able to have the people that we need to be able to run our facilities as well as all of our programs at Clean Water Services. So there's not only a regional pool of talent that we're competing for with the other utilities, but also nationally there's a much larger pool, and all utilities across the U.S. are facing these competitions for talent, especially as our baby boomers are retiring from service. Materials and equipment supply chain continues to be a challenge for us, both in terms of lead times and costs impacting the utility. Higher construction costs driven by the labor issues within the construction community, as well as their material supply chain issues are also driving their costs. And of course, there's the increased pressures of inflation that's impacting us with chemicals, our utility costs, and all of the materials at Clean Water Services. So this budget was prepared with these drivers in mind. Our next driver is our regulatory compliance driver. And you've all heard that our new permit became effective on January 1st, 2023. And I want to do a shout out to our regulatory affairs team and all of the folks that contributed to the permit, as well as our city partners. There's increased monitoring and compliance standards that we're going to be meeting, and you're going to see that reflected throughout the budget that the teams are going to present. The increased compliance standards on air emissions really impacted our ability to have what we call grandfathering standards for our engine generator sets at Rock Creek. We now, because of the maintenance levels, we would need to meet current air toxics requirements. And those engine generators don't have the ability to do that without substantially more investment. It's also coming at the time when we are converting to renewable natural gas and working with Northwest Natural Gas. So you'll hear more about that strategy, but there is a hit to the budget this year. Chemical costs, so increased chemicals for compliance as well as different chemicals. You're going to hear about that from the team. Temperature changes. We always talk about temperature changes from the context of our permit, right, in terms of what we need for our thermal needs. But temperature and climate together is creating more variability in terms of how it's impacting our watershed. The impact of the watershed and the ecology impacts water quality, which therefore impacts Clean Water Services. It also impacts our workforce, and it impacts our community. So really, temperature changes and climate and the variability it brings, both extremes, hot and cold, we're going to need to continue to manage to have a resilient Clean Water Services. So you'll hear about these compliance drivers throughout the budget presentation. And the third...
Can I go back?
Sure.
In some ways, I wish we had a Post-it, one of those Post-it papers. I think at least at some point during our meeting today, we'd like to hear a little bit more about what might be on the horizon with regard to PFAS and PFOS.
That sounds great. And I think Bob's presentation for regulatory affairs will be able to talk about PFAS. Our people strategy. We need the talent here at Clean Water Services to be able to deliver on the services and the programs, and we're implementing our people strategy. That's about building a resilient and robust workforce. We need to reinvest in our training that stopped as part of COVID. We are investing more in this coming year to reinstitute it, and we're continuing to plan for our retirement peak. While we talk about the baby boomers, you're going to see some data a little bit later that the next generation is also starting their retirement phase. So that'll be something that Mark will share with you. We did modify our payments, our pay structure to keep pace with the market. We modified our performance-based pay, our goal share program, as well as instituted a cost of living adjustment. We are implementing our new union agreement with the Teamsters Union with PERS pickup and implementing this also through our non-representative employees.
If we could pause just a moment, we'd like to welcome Director Roy Rogers to the meeting, and we just need to shuffle around a chair. You bet. Sorry, I'm not giving up my chair. I've broken it in for the day. And so you know, we have all selected Terry Song as our Budget Committee Chair.
We did it before we got here.
Oh, I'm happy to share a mic too, if it. Oh, okay. All righty, great.
So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Mark Jockers to talk about our workforce.
Thank you very much. And Chair, I see you're holding up a couple of things there that we left on your, in front of each of the Budget Committee members. We'll get another one for Commissioner Rogers here. So if we can get those pieces for him, thank you. So the last thing that Diane talked about was a people strategy as a driver of our budget. And I wanted to give you just a couple of slides to talk a little bit about what the demographics of our organization looks like and pieces that we are tracking. We've been tracking both the generational kind of distribution of employees as well as what percentage of employees are eligible to retire. Across senior leadership, among supervisors, and as the organization as a whole. One thing we've seen since 2019 is a gradual decline in the number of employees eligible to retire, which is a good sign. We're seeing a turnover. So in 2019, 40% of our senior leadership was eligible to retire. And as you can see on the slide here, oh, we are at 40%. I'm sorry, 64% was eligible to retire in 2019. 64. Now we're down to 40%. And some of you may know a number of those people that have stepped away. Nora Curtis, Mark Poling, Nate Cullen. There's a number of people that are no longer that were in that area. We saw similar trends as well among supervisors. In 2019, it was 17%. Now we're down to 11.3%. And this is important for us as we look at succession planning and where we invest. Also, as part of the district's Culture, Equity, and Learning program, we have been tracking diversity of the organization across two primary axes. One is gender and one is employees of color. What you can see here is the gender piece. And what you'll see is an increase in the percentage of women and non-binary people in the workforce to 33% from 27% in 2019. Similarly, on employees of color, we've seen an increase in the last several years from 9% in 2019 to 16%. Now, we've implemented a number of initiatives in the last 3 years to increase the diversity of our candidate pool, which is really, that's really the core of it. That's the root issue there. The changing demographics are likely a reflection of both the changing available workforce and some of the efforts that we have taken to more deliberately attract and retain women and employees of color. The last slide that I want to talk about on workforce is a real driver, and it's a challenge for us. The current economic conditions have have created increased competition for talent, especially talent with technical skills, engineering, maintenance techs, people operators at our wastewater recovery facilities. We're really struggling on a lot of those things. We're facing a number of other headwinds too. One is the many long-term employees are retiring. Clean Water Services added the surface water management utility in 1990. And we spent probably 91, 92, 93 staffing up. So if you add 30 to that, you get to 2022 and 2023. So we have a real generation of employees that are eligible to retire after 30 years of service here. So we're seeing a lot of that. The other driver is we have added staff in the last 4 years in very targeted areas to meet our business needs. It was interesting, we were just at the water policy fly-in, which Director Treese was there with us, and had an opportunity to talk to a lot of other utility leaders from around the country. And what we're hearing is very similar issues where there's a 15 to 20% vacancy rate. So it's a real challenge. We are trying to look at how we fill that by more active recruiting, by putting together trainee programs and apprentice programs so we can bring people into the workforce. Yes?
Chair, with a couple of questions. And I don't know when you want us to just interject this question. Okay, so just interject. So this is where I was a little selfish in forwarding my questions about demographics and population. I have the question for Clean Water Services and for Washington County, and I appreciate your sharing with all of us that we all turn to the Portland State University. I have to take this call, sorry. Hang on. But we all need to be grounded in where to find the data for the forecast of our community demographics in 5 years, where we are today, 5 years and 10 years, and where we get the specific data. And because I looked, and it's a little challenge, and there's multiple spreadsheets, and it's driving me crazy.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
Drill down a little bit, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but what kinds of positions are vacant and what kinds of positions are filled, with the world really changing pretty rapidly? Highly skilled technical folks are what we're all looking for, and those, I hate to say at a lower level, but that's what it is. It's not so disturbing because we're finding technologies to replace them. So you're saying globally that's what it is. What is it specifically?
Across departments, what we see is the opening, the difficult to fill positions are often, we've had a real challenge with electricians, right? Instrumentation techs, maintenance techs, pieces like that. Particularly the maintenance staff, we used to use the lumber industry, mills, as kind of the training ground, so we could go out to Stimson and hire folks from there. That isn't a feeder a whole lot anymore. Certainly Stimson is still active, but a lot of other lumber mills are not there. So it is a lot of those pieces there. The other challenges we've been having, although we just recently had some success, is engineers. There's a lot of competition for engineers, and how we recruit those. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd say it's across the technical group. So we do need technical talent. It's key to us. So we're really looking at what we can train up through apprenticeships and interns, but also what do we need as core technical talent. So it'd be laboratory. I mean, I could go all across the board. Regulatory affairs folks that we need. It's very distinctive technical talent that we're looking for. But it's across the entire organization. HR people, it's just, we're competing within a market here that there's a lot of competition. Joe just told me a story that we were really great at hiring a construction supervisor. A great person, we were excited, they were lured away to become a public works director at a smaller community. So it's just a lot of competition for the top talent. So we need to be in there, and we do believe with the adjustments that we made to our scale, that's going to really help us, not only to retain, but also to recruit, so.
Can I follow up? Because that's my point, because your scale is definitely changing. And if I look at, a 70 out of roughly 200, if all 70 of those are managers and highly technical people, we're in trouble. And I'm not hearing you say that, and I heard some generic answer, and I'm not criticizing. You may not have the data, but if all 70 of those are your top managers and top folks in the organization, we need to deal with a whole lot more than just scale. I mean, there's something else going on. So I can't tell.
And
Just
it is
look at
not. It is not all senior. I mean, an example that you'll see later is when we talk about enterprise asset department. We have certain positions there that we really struggle to hire, particularly related to electricians. So what we have to do is we contract out that service. So those are professional services. Now, if we could get the staff on, those professional services would go away, but we have to backfill with contract pieces there. So it is a lot of that technical stuff. Certainly we do have managers as well, but among that there's field techs and there's electricians. But this modified pay system that we agreed to with the union last year and is reflected in this budget, we feel is going to help us a lot. In terms of attracting talent, we hired an electrician last year for the first time in many years. The position had been open for a long time. I believe that part of that was that the pay scale changed, and we were paying more at the market rate. We were able to attract that person.
Chair, may I make a comment? In reflecting this issue, I think it's really interesting to look at the roadmap for HR here and see what the different steps are that are being taken to make sure that we're addressing this problem. So where I have, Director Rogers, I have confidence. Yeah, so do I. I have confidence that we're looking at a number of different strategies to address this particular issue, including workforce development and supporting those actions.
We're also participating in the nationwide discussion. So I was just on a workforce development discussion with the White House's staff and EPA as they're looking specifically at the water sector. So the water sector itself is looking to expand its workforce and its workforce development, and they were looking at how to really harness all of the different departments that could participate. The National Association of Clean Water Agencies were all talking about this. The Water Research Foundation was just here on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we're actually funding a research project related to workforce. So it's a issue, and when I look at where Clean Water Services is, we're in the middle of the pack. So I do know our strategies are working, but we need to drive this 15% down below 10%, and that's truly the goal, to be able to do that. So.
Thank you. I don't disagree. The workforce isn't the answer for technical positions, as you know. I mean, that's more entry level and middle. So I'm concerned at the top, especially with your retirement rate. But that's a question for another day. It has nothing to do with budget, but okay.
Thank you.
Answered, thanks.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kathy.
Back to Diane.
Back to, I'm sorry, to Diane. My
With
notes were wrong.
those three drivers, you're going to see the priorities in the budget. So it's investing in talented people, which means we need to reinvest and restart our training and learning and education program that really got sidetracked through COVID. There's a lot of excitement about that with the team to be able to restore that. It's continuing to manage our inflation, our pricing, and the regulatory and economic factors moving forward, and you'll hear about that. We're shifting our project delivery program and our capital improvement projects. So you saw that discussion within the budget. We had previously been on a just-in-time delivery, which was really an engineering-focused project delivery method so that we would not have a lot of idle capacity out in the system. We do need to continue to do that, but we need to marry it up with our financial attributes of planning for the capital improvement program going forward. So we really streamlined and tightened up the capital improvement program this year, and we're going to continue to do that. So we're implementing really this planned strategic, and it's really a sequence delivery method, because we found that we were a little flat-footed when it came to being able to participate in the grant round, because you have to be shovel-ready. So we are going to be advancing more pre-planning and pre-design to be able to meet the requirements of grants, and also we want to be part of the CHIPS discussion that's going on to make sure that Clean Water Services can deliver on the economic needs of that sector here in our region. We're also looking to make sure, re-look at our capacity and our capability within, for growth, for additional economic growth with our industries within our East Basin Master Planning, and we're now commencing the West Basin Master Planning. And also to make sure that we're promoting equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout our organization and all of our practices. So all of this is part of the way we think about the future. So for us, it's working not only annually in the next 5 years and 10 years, but it's really thinking in the decades of work that we need to do here. So it's really focused on these strategic outcome areas of organizational excellence, integrated water resources management and resilient watersheds, research and innovation and resource recovery. Catalyzing transformational partnerships is just critical, because we can't do what we need to do within the watershed by ourselves. We need partners. And also, we need to be part of contributing to the region's environmental and economic vitality. So what you're seeing is the team is defining this through strategic planning. So we shared with you the programmatic roadmaps. They came to you as part of the budget packets. They're aligned with the departmental roadmaps that you got here today. And now we're beginning our strategic roadmaps. And the first one we did was climate action roadmap that the board saw. And we're going to ask the board to chart CWAC to work with us on this. So it's really getting the momentum. I call it moving the flywheel. So we're taking actions that are practical today and pragmatic, but it's accelerating our ability to make the difference so we can have a resilient clean water services in the future. So decades matter here with the work that we're doing.
Could you pause there for just 1 second? On the a couple slides ago, you mentioned the West Basin Master Plan. And so I want to thank CWAC, and here we have a subset of the CWAC members for reviewing all of that. I learned some really cool things from that plan as well. But I want to thank you in advance. Please share it with your fellow committee members about the West Basin Master Plan that's being worked on. And as you talked about the program roadmaps and the department roadmaps, is this setup something that you've already been introducing CWAC to, or is it something that
It's coming to
coming?
CWAC,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because I think this is where CWAC can provide their wisdom and insight. It's really looking and diving into the strategies and initiatives we're putting in place. So we can get that.
I just want to reinforce that CWAC is really from my standpoint, very unique. I just eat up this kind of work as a board member. But it's very reassuring to me as a board member that in addition to my colleagues on the full board, we also have our community members also very actively diving into this as members of CWAC. And due to another conflicting regional meeting, I haven't been able to get to CWAC meetings the way I would like. So, but I am maximizing the opportunity to have you here, a subset of you here today, to extend my thanks and appreciation for learning and advising us. So, thank you.
What used to be in the minds and the heads of our leaders, we're now commencing it to writing, right? And putting metrics and benchmarking to it to make sure that we are making the data-centric decisions that we should be making. So I want to applaud the team to doing this. It took a lot of effort by all of the teams, their departments, as well as the leadership, and they feel very good about getting to this point. And the next is the strategic outcome areas, and then we're going to continually drive this, this work together. So I do want to acknowledge their work in getting this done for us. Our next piece is to really begin focusing on our dashboarding and making the synthesis of where we are visible. So that's another area that we're going to be working on as a team. So no longer is it just in our minds, it's also commenced in writing. So for me, this is the Clean Water Services way, and that's one of the gifts I wanted to provide to the organization and to all of you here in the region, is to have this so we can see where we're going, so we can do our work over decades. So I'm going to shift this over to Kathy to talk about who receives our services.
Thank you. So Clean Water Services provides sanitary sewer and surface water management services throughout the Tualatin watershed. We provide both regional and local services. I'm going to define those in a moment, but first we want to talk about who receives those services. So the regional-only services are provided to the cities of Beaverton, Cornelius, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Sherwood, Tigard, and Tualatin. The district also provides regional services and local services to the urban unincorporated areas of Washington County and the cities of Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, and North Plains. The district also bills for all industrial services within our service area, and for city industrial customers that reside inside of city limits, we do remit some local charges and any right-of-way fees that the cities charge to those cities. First, I'm going to talk about regional services. Clean Water Services provides regional services to all customers in the service area. The regional sanitary sewer rate supports the operation, maintenance, and investment of pipes, pumps, and water resource recovery facilities. It includes the construction, operating, maintaining of treatment plants, sewer pump stations, pressure lines, and designing, building, maintaining sewer lines 24 inches and larger. On the regional surface water management side, that rate supports watershed restoration and administration of the MS4 permit. So it's compliance, reporting, oversight of MPEDs and MS4 permit, maintaining minimum street flows, and service area restoration enhancing in the stream corridors. On the local side, the Clean Water Services provides local services to support operating and maintaining the local collection systems and the 24-hour emergency response to those areas. So that's the design, building, maintaining of sewer lines 21 inches and smaller, cleaning, inspecting sewer pipes, sweeping streets, maintaining water quality facilities, clean catch basins and water quality manholes, and repairing infrastructure. Next, I'm going to start going into some of our financial numbers that are inside of the budget. So this is a nice graphical that shows you how the district's budget is made up for 23-24 of its sources and uses of current funds. So in the current budget, we have current revenues of $218.4 million that are going to be used to provide operating capital outlay costs of $128.5 million, debt of about 19 million and capital investments of 86.8 million.
Can we stop there
You
for
sure
just
can.
1 second?
Yeah.
I appreciate that you've shared with us a paper copy of the CIP. It just feels like a different deliverable than prior years. And I especially appreciate getting it because on the Washington County side, we're developing a first-ever capital improvement plan, which is pretty extraordinary that we don't have one. But I particularly would like just a brief assessment of some kind. Clean Water Services has celebrated its 50 years. And I recall when I started on the commission or on the board of directors for Clean Water Services in 2019, you helped me, all of us new folks, really get grounded in what CWS does, but also the state of affairs for the regional pipe service, the local pipe service that you take care of in select places, and also the treatment facilities. And it's been really impressive to me over the years seeing, hearing about the approaches for the upgrading of plant capacity, replacement of equipment that's worn out over time, and seeing the different contracts that we've needed to approve over time. And I'm just wondering at this juncture, are you at a strategic inflection point with the capital improvement plan, or is there something notable about this year's CIP compared to past years, or what might be coming in future years?
It's a really great question. And let me answer it in a couple of ways. So in the past with our budget, you always had our capital improvement projects on the back.
Yep.
But it was just a series of line items of projects. But it did give you a window what the cash flow would be over time. What we wanted to do was to also share with you that behind each project, there's an individual project sheet that also looks at the funding over time.
Yep.
So we wanted to prepare that not at the final budget adoption, but we pushed the system up, and thank you to Aaron and Tanya to be able to do that. So the budget committee in future meetings will have the benefit of this information. This document is not yet a community document that reads in a way that talks about the priorities, just like what you're talking about. We captured that narrative within the budget, but what I would like to do is have that within the capital improvement program, because the budget looks at the annual priorities. And what I want for this committee to have is the feeling over the decades where we're going to be. So as it relates to the inflection point, we need to see the outcome of the West Basin facilities planning effort. That we'll be able to see more about where we are. Our biggest inflection point is related to regulatory compliance, and that is when it will trigger additional water quality technology. Roy always talks about that, so the technology piece to Clean Water Services is extremely important. And that next technology that some facilities across the country are having to leap to is bringing in what I call more of water, more of drinking water types of technologies. And the team is now assessing when we may need to go to what's called a membrane technology. When is that inflection point? And that's really because we're trying to avoid water quality issues on this river as we continue to grow. We're looking at aluminum toxicity. How are we going to manage that? We're looking at copper. We're going to be looking at, I think one day, Bob, we talk about total suspended solids management, and that all those things are pushing towards a membrane technology. And what we do know, to control the costs in this region, we have to see this at least 10 years in advance, because we need to begin building the rate base to be able to afford that. Otherwise, you're spiking the rates, right, when you're trying to build something over a 2, 3, 4-year period. So the team here at Clean Water Services is looking, and that's why this decade, multiple decade look is so important. But we want to build that. The team did a continual improvement project. They have 4 phases of CIP improvements that they want to make, and I'm really proud of the team that did that, and they're currently implementing it as a team.
Thank you for bringing that to life a little bit more for me. I appreciate it. And Mercury, where do we put on the interesting topic list?
Yeah, mercury, PFAS, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Bob thinks about all of those issues. Keeps him up at night.
Thank you.
Can I ask, because Catherine's comment is one that really gets to the heart of the whole question I've had on this budget and conversations that we've had. On the county side, we're talking about what's the cost of service. I know you are too. I've always called it the wholesale and the retail side. You call it the regional and the,
Local.
Local, yeah, thank you. And her question regarding the CIP program begs that issue as well. Are we close at all to being able to cost account out what's it really cost on the regional side? So that if we get down to saying to cities, and I think there's an easier method than just having telemetry and valves, I think there's an easier way of getting it. So I'll share at another meeting another time. But if we can cost it, then we can send one big bill to the city of Beaver, one big bill to City of Hillsborough, one big bill to Wall, whatever you want to pick. But I don't see that baked in here. I see a lot of numbers, not unlike we've done before, and I give you an A+ for all the effort. But where's the bigger picture of what's that regional system cost, so that you can sit there and say, here's what, if we build you one bill, here's what the cost would be? Or is it all kind of scattered throughout?
No, I really appreciate that vision, right? So with the underlying cost of services analysis, we understand what the regional cost is. To be able to get to that one bill vision, you would need to have essentially a couple of meters. So we would know flow and loads that a city is contributing. So part of our challenge is that we have one city that's probably closer to that vision, and that would be the city of Sherwood because of the nature of how it connects to the regional system. Hillsborough and Beaverton, it's more of a challenge because the pipeline systems are all intertwined. But the team is now doing the underlying systems understanding to know what it would take to get to a vision like that, because that would then allow a full-service city to have one bill. They could decide how they want to pay for those costs with their community, and we could then charge on actual flow and loads. So it's
And I don't want to belabor this at all.
big vision.
And I know you've talked, about the valves and in essence, the telemetry to do that. To me, it's much simpler than that, because all you need to do is say, how many water users do you have? And start with the cities and just bill, so we miss a few, so what? It's not a huge number compared to what we're doing in billing costs and fooling around with it all. The city of Sherwood, if we want to pick on Sherwood, you say it's simpler, but how many water customers? I don't care if they're on septic tanks, we're still going to bill them. Let the city deal with, what they're going to deal with the hookups. But I think there's a way of getting there, but how do we get to the numbers before we even implement? How do we get the numbers if we're not
Gross level.
cost segregating?
So we have the gross level. The level that is missing is understanding the infiltration and inflow contribution from the committee, from the specific community. Because some communities are at extremely high level, which drives costs, treatment costs. Others are probably more tighter, which would then reduce their costs and their impact. So I would say all pieces, other than the I&I situation, is well understood.
How would we, again, I'm going to pick on my chairs,
Why don't the three of us?
have a conversation?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, perfect.
yes, and this budget of censoring, the censoring of the conveyance system is starting down the pathway. Yeah, so, thank you.
I have a question too, or it's more so a comment. For the shift from the just-in-time approach, and I see the benefits in what you're working towards from the development community's perspective is kind of what I want to share is when we're making investments in UGB expansion areas, it was always comforting that Clean Water Services was coming from the just-in-time approach. And in fact, I recognize, I don't know how many people do, but we were early more often than we were late. Or even just in time, we're probably early on everything we've built for these UGB expansion areas, which is part of the problem I think you're trying to solve. It might be helpful to have some kind of outreach to the development community to say that just in time going away doesn't mean that we're not still gonna be there when you need us there.
Correct. In fact, we're going to be there when you need us in a much more agile way. So I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, and also, knowing that we need to be thinking 10 and 20 years out from a land use standpoint, yeah, it's easy. When I think, excuse me, what I forgot to say was, when I think about an example of the redevelopment of Division in the city of Portland, for example, where there was a huge transformation over a number of years from tired-looking mix of neighborhoods and residential, single-story, to many potentially mixed-use or residential four-story buildings that meets the community character for modern times, but that's 4x the number of toilets and sinks, right? So as you're thinking 10 years out, there will be times in future decades where we have areas of Washington County that go through the more tremendous evolution than we've already seen, say, in Beaverton Central and other places. And so I'm not quite sure when that will come in, but I think we need to start making some assumptions about that, particularly as climate change, population demographics, and cost structures will require us to do so. And it's going to happen on somebody's watch, and since the effects will be 10 years later, I don't know if I need to do something now in this term that I'm in, or not, or wait till the next. So, anyway, that's what's on my mind.
Thank you.
So here we're showing total expenditures. We're giving some historical fiscal 15 through 22 actuals. The bar graph is the departmental expenditures, which is labor and materials and services. The light blue is debt service. The dark green is capital projects. And the golden color is other fund outlays. And other fund outlays, that includes things usually like utility, bad debt expense, franchise fees that are collected remitted to the cities, equipment purchases, and pass through the local industrial flow and right-of-way fees to the cities, and also any planned mid-year adjustments. When you look at this trajectory, it shows you that historically, Clean Water Services has developed a budget that fully funds what we need to, a budget, but we only spend what we need to. So you see that in earlier years, the trajectory is different than our proposed budget for 24 and a revised. And just so you're aware, the fiscal year 23 revised, that is our adopted budget for 23 and includes any board-approved budget transfers from contingency or other departmental during the year. And then, of course, 24 is our proposed budget. Some anomalies that show out there are in 19, you see a big jump in capital spending, a green bar, and we just delivered a lot on projects in that year. We had the Upper Tualatin Interceptor at $26.3 million in there. We had the Durham secondary expansion at $9.4 million. We had the Durham O&M building at $7.8 million. Bull Mountain Trunk at 5.9. We had River Terrace Pump Station at 5.7 million. And we purchased the property now where the Ripple Building is going to be at 2.3 million in that year. So we had a lot of capital projects going on that year. And that weird anomaly on the other outlay in 19 was the $15 million that we sent over to PERS to establish a side account for our pension liability to stabilize, hopefully stabilize future employer rates in that program. 20 also had a large capital program in that year. It was a continuation, really, of the Durham secondary expansion there at 12.6 million, and the Tualatin Upper Interceptor at 5.6 million. We also did a remodel at Rock Creek, admin buildings at 6.5 million. So capital projects going on there. And then you can see too in 22 there was a big jump in other outlay. So usually those are like one-time occurrences, and similar in this year, that was the refunding of the 2011B bonds at a $6 million savings to the district in that year.
And one of the shifts in 23-24 is the projects that are built in natural systems as capital projects, they need to come onto the books for stewardship for operating expense. So we're starting to see that program growing for stewardship.
So first, we're going to look at some revenue trends. This graph is showing actuals for 21 and 22. The revised budget, which we mentioned was the adopted budget for 23 with any board-approved transfers during the year, and the proposed budget for 24. Service charges for sanitary sewer and surface water management, that's our main and largest revenue source at $177.2 million, or 81% of our revenues. System development charges are our second highest at $27.6 million, or about 13% of our current revenues. And these are the fees we assess on customers just connecting to the system, and covers the open capacity in the system they're buying into and future growth in the area. So these revenues are used for capital improvements. We show interest earnings at $6.6 million, our Build America Bond subsidy at $1.2 million roughly, and we have some miscellaneous fees in there at $5.8 million. That really relates to some miscellaneous fees, but also any grants we're receiving or contributions from developers for construction. On the expenditure side, similarly, we're showing the 21 and 22 actuals there, and our revised budget for 23, and what we're proposing for 24. Departmental expenses, that's our labor and material and services in the budget, and that's at $116.9 million in this year. That capital, we are showing it $86.8 million, and as you can see in there with our trending, that's reflecting our change in how we're budgeting in 24. You see a slight dip then in capital. We're trying to budget what we actually anticipate producing in that year, but we'll talk a little bit later about how we're going to reserve some monies related to development that does happen that we need to cover. Debt service, we have that at $18.9 million. We have as you can see, our debt service is fairly low. It leverages us well if we wanted to issue debt in the future. We do have a planned issuance that we put in, if we opt that, in 2024 at $50 million. We look at that as an opportunity to fund some of the larger, long-spanning projects for that generational share in the rate revenue. On other outlays, we have that at $11.5 million, and you see that bump in 22 that related to the refunding of the 2011 Bs.
If I might, and maybe you'll speak to this later, but I just thought to mention it now. Could you speak to, several board members attended the National Association of Counties meeting and in February in DC. And we had the opportunity to hear more about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Acts in ways that really brought the opportunity of those acts to life, as opposed to our reading the summaries from our staff and so forth. And so I was wondering if you could remind all of us as the Budget Committee what, if any, opportunities there might be generation. It seems to me like we have a generational opportunities in congressional funding, and I'm wondering, does that help
Yes.
Clean Water Services?
That's a very good question. Generational might even be an understatement. I would think it's historic. What particularly in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, it represented the largest federal investment in water infrastructure in U.S. history. So it is enormous. The last time we saw money being distributed from the federal government for water infrastructure at this level was probably in the 70s, not long after the Clean Water Act. So there is a real opportunity there. And everyone in this region is working very hard at that. And thanks to our board's prioritization, we have been successful so far in, at least we've been shortlisted for about a $5 million project out in Forest Grove. It's an I&I abatement, which is a longer term issue too, which helps us delay needs for expansion of the treatment plant. But having that share there, and we continue to look at that over and over. The other major impact of that bipartisan infrastructure bill was accelerating additional funding to the Bureau of Reclamation Safety of Dams project, which has moved up the Scoggins Dam seismic repair project by a couple of years. So it's going to be built in the summer. We just don't know what summer it will be, but hopefully sooner rather than later.
And the other part of that is the allocation that the state of Oregon gets through the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. So there's a prioritization within the state on which communities get the funding. Often it's the smaller communities that are struggling with bonding. But they are interested in entities like Clean Water Services because we can meet the higher bar of the auditing requirements that then once we repay, then the other communities don't have to have that same bar. When Director Treese was with us at the fly-in, we heard a whole hour's discussion from the Inspector General as to the requirements of the auditing, especially the single audits, and all I could think of is Kathy would say, oh boy, oh goody. But, so it does come with this much higher bar of auditing, and so you have to have a sophisticated utility that can manage through that.
Right up your professional alley, huh? We have benefited from Commissioner Rogers or Director Roberts' experience on, what did I say?
Roberts. That's all right.
Rogers' experience with Clean Water Service, or we've benefited from his professional experience as a financial auditor in his decades of service at Clean Water Services. I need more caffeine, sorry.
So the 24 budget includes a proposed 4% increase to the regional center sewer rate and the regional surface water management rate. It also includes a 4% increase to the local sanitary sewer rate and the local stormwater management rate. And that's the customers that we bill in unincorporated Washington County and the direct service cities. These increases will add an estimated $2.44 per month to the typical residential customer's bill. The proposed rate increases are planned to meet inflationary, water quality regulatory, and investment and capital needs. The goal is to, in the future, not need to spike rates. The district plans routine and predictable rate increases. The budget also includes increases to the system development charges, and that increase is based on the published engineering news record and construction cost index as of March 2023, which is at 3%. So you see for the sanitary system, SDC, it increased to $199 to $6,824 per equivalent dwelling unit, and the surface water management, SDC, increased by $19 to $660 per equivalent service unit.
And I just want to share with the full budget committee that the board of directors has learning sessions and work sessions with CWS staff, and we've made them come to us with spreadsheets and presentations that we really dig in to what's driving costs and where there's stresses and strains. So while we sit here today going, yep, have been there, done that, seen it, it's because we really have seen it. So we're not being cavalier and just saying, oh, well, 4% sounds comfortable, it's less than 5, fits on one hand. We really have dug into the costs involved here. So, but it's because of our great staff.
Thank you. And yeah, just so you're aware, we have been in the process of a cost of service study that's identified that split between our sanitary sewer and surface water management utilities, and is also looking at that regional and local component. We're winding down the cost of service, and we'll be heading then into the rate development. So we're hoping in the next fiscal year to have some updated rate analysis. So this gives you, you've seen this in the past, this is providing our rates as compared to other similar comparable utilities in the region. So the first line there is Clean Water Services. That's a combined rate for sanitary sewer and surface water management at $62.50 for the average residential customer. And that compares to Vancouver, Salem, McMinnville, Lake Oswego, and Portland. The district provides a substantially higher level of wastewater treatment than nearly all other comparable service providers, and was yet still competitive in the rate that we charge.
I'm a little surprised on that our sanitary is almost half of the city of Portland's, given that they get to release their water in the big, huge river compared to our little sensitive river.
Yeah, their cost is really driven because of the combined sewer overflow issue that they had. They had to make really big pipes and tunnels, and that was a huge investment
Okay.
the city of Portland had to make. So our technology is a lot greater, but because we're already a separated system, we didn't have to do that kind of investment.
Got it. Good reminder. Thank you.
Next, this slide really speaks to the district's goal at keeping rate increases level and stable. This is the 10-year rate history, and it shows over the 10-year period we have an average annual rate increase of about 3.4%. We're real proud that even in 2021, we deferred our planned rate increases based on the pandemic. We really were concerned of where rates would need to go after that to meet our operating and capital investment. We did a slight increase in 22 in response to that at 4.7%, but now we're back down and stable in 23 and 24 at 4% in line with our past forecasting, and that really attributed to the work of management and sequencing and prioritizing that investment in the capital during that time period and bringing on of staff.
Gives you an average that's 3.67%.
Mm-hmm.
4% higher, so
Yeah.
it's like your rate change is.
But here's what's pivotal. We on the board of directors made a policy choice during COVID to not increase rates.
No, I get that, and I'm not saying don't show it, but the 10-year average is skewed by that year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah.
right, that is an aberration.
Mm-hmm.
We hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's important to show it for sure, but
Yeah.
that 10-year average, I think, is.
Could we have another line then? Or just a call out?
Yeah, just saying the
Yeah.
average, if you take 21 out, if you
Yeah.
take 21 out and 22 out, it's actually 3.67%.
Yeah, but so we took,
That in your business?
we took,
It is communicating the right message.
you were very clear with us when we made those two decisions, 6-month decisions for a year total, that would cost us on into the future. There was a cost of delay. Will, over the course of time, if we continue to use good practices and we don't have any other blips, how many more qualifications can I make? Will the overall percentage ever go back into the 3s?
I think what I'm seeing on the future, so once the team helps decide when we might need this technology changed, what I see is the sanitary sewer rate can come down. We'll get to that knee of the curve again. The MS4, the surface water, that's going to have to continue. And I don't believe we're going to be able to hold 4% for the stormwater system.
Yep, yep. Unless we're all willing to go back to natural fibers and less plastics and stuff like that. Got it. Major lifestyle changes. Thank you.
And so this is showing that combined rate for, and as we compare to other jurisdictions in the watershed. This is the dark blue line is the regional component, so that's charged by all the jurisdictions in the watershed. And the light blue, that's that local component that each jurisdiction is charging to cover their local services. The green bar is the right-of-way fees or franchise fees that are charged by cities. And so you can see from there, then the line going through there, that's number of accounts billed. So that first column, that clean water services, that's the unincorporated area that we bill at $60.06, and that was back in '23. Then the subsequent bar is the same amount, but that's what we're charging to the direct service cities. And you see that little green line, that relates to franchise fees paid to those, but cities, similar rate though at $60.06. You can see from here that, you know, based on the number of customer accounts, the larger the number of accounts, the lower their local rate needed to be because of the economies of scale and spreading that cost over more customers. Tualatin might be the one anomaly there when you look at that.
And so into the future, as we're looking at the difference between the regional rate and the local rate that we charge the unincorporated and the cities that we provide direct service to, that will be part of this next year's study. I don't know that we can hold 4% for the local service because of the needs that are being generated, but we'll do that with a data-centric approach as we look at it.
This just gives a graphical representation of those accounts. The blue area, that's the urban unincorporated areas that Clean Water serves at 61,320, and the direct service cities, you know, Banks, Durham, Gaston, King City, North Plains at 13,180. So that's a total of oh no, it's a total of 74,500, or 41% of that customer base. So the green areas there, that's the city's direct billing. So obviously spread over their local rates spread over fewer customers. Okay, so now talk a little bit about total expenditures in our budget for this year. So the theme of this is we're setting a new baseline in this year. The proposal is $234.3 million in total expenditures. That's a 3.9% increase over the prior year.
Okay, wait a second. I'm slow. Why are we setting a new baseline?
Because of the new permit, so the new, there's just a jump in the need for chemicals and resources. So really that baseline gets reset depending on what the permit at the time is telling us, yeah. So we have a lot of work to do on the surface stormwater side, so, yeah.
So that 3.9% increase, that includes $16.69 million increase in operating. That's that material and services and labor for the district. $1.8 million in debt service, $973,100 in other outlays, and a decrease of $10.7 million in capital. And that's that reflection of this new way we're budgeting for capital costs in this year. No.
The way to think of it is that in past years, we carried over a lot of money because it was appropriated as a project, but it wasn't going to come to fruition. Right. It wasn't triggered, right. So instead, we're going to put that money in contingency. Yeah.
Kathy, could I ask a revenue question? Sure. A big picture revenue question. In terms of the agencies that we benchmark ourselves against for best practices, maybe not necessarily just the local agencies, but how does our revenue mix compare to the agencies that we think are best practices in terms of not relying so heavily on rates or not relying so heavily on SDCs? does our revenue mix, is it the revenue mix that we want to have to fund the operation?
Yeah, I can answer it by saying all other utilities aspire to be like Clean Water Services because we have a substantial pay-as-you-go program, so we use the annual cash. Other utilities are so far in debt that they don't have, one, enough coverage to issue more debt. Secondly, they don't have enough pay-as-you-go money to deal with your asset management investments for replacement and renewal. So when you look at Clean Water Services, we're utilized as sort of the standard that people would like to get to. Most are way off the curve, so they're having rate spikes, they're having community issues related to those rate spikes. They want the stability we have, and this is really because we started this back in 1990. So that decade, those decades matter. So that's why we're ahead. So those communities are trying to figure it out now.
So I think the important thing, I want to make sure we get right to your answer too. SDC and rates, those are, every utility is going to have a variation of those things. It really is that debt service and the capital investment. And as Diane said, we really see that. We see many utilities that are really strapped with debt, and we fortunately have a much better situation than that.
Are there any other revenue sources that CWS has pursued over the years that could help minimize potential rate increases or SDC increases?
This has been sort of Director Rogers' sort of dream, was to be able to take and monitorize the innovations that we do so that we could generate other income into the utility. So it's this long-term aspiration for Clean Water Services to be able to generate other opportunities, yeah. So you'll see that within the budget. We're going to be talking about Ripple and the Research and Innovation Program and looking at how do we turn that into money to benefit our ratepayers.
And on the margins right now, for instance, we have a tipping fee for fats, oils, and grease at our Durham facility. So we bring in 100,000 gallons a week. That is a revenue source for us. It also helps boost production in our digesters for on-site energy. So we get to reduce our overall energy use. We also get a tipping fee for that comes in. Those are kind of on the margins. But yes, we're always trying to look at what are other revenue sources. What's that bigger piece there?
A big one that's coming in future years is the sale of our biogas through an agreement with Northwest Natural Gas. So they're going to buy our biogas. But in order to sell it, we actually are not producing electricity with it, so we have to buy electricity. But there is a net positive ROI for us to do that.
You can probably understand that the question also comes from a perspective of fees.
Yes.
And being sensitive to the stacking of fees that happens when houses are being built and it's $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 that are just fees, trying to see if there's other alternative revenues that would help us not have to have a $200 annual increase in SDC fees that are going to just go right to the homeowner.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
So that was total expenditures. Now we're focusing on the operating budget and that's setting of a new baseline. So the budget includes $116.99 million or a 16.7% increase in operating costs. For personal services, that's a 17.7% increase. And as Diane and Mark had talked about, this reflects a new baseline in our investment in people. The goal is to stay competitive in the market, to recruit, retain, and develop talent. And it includes our modified pay structure, things like this. The employer now is paying the 6% contribution to the individual account program with PERS for their employees. The 3.5% COLA being applied in this year, along with the class and comp studies going on. And we have 9 new positions included. That includes 5 conversions of long-term temporary in this budget.
So I just want to put a plug in, Chair, and later in the agenda, I'm I'd like to have some discussion this afternoon as we each on the board of directors have the opportunity of spending a little bit more time as we want or need with Clean Water Services management staff. And we are all very fortunate to have all of the staff that we have at the utility. But Diane's leadership as our CEO is just extraordinary. And the way that the staff has incorporated best known practices for an organization and their work, for example, in seeking the Baldrige Performance Award. And we here have the benefit of seeing it through the program roadmaps and the department roadmaps, but I'm very mindful of the fact that it's come at a cost. And also, we have the maturation of pursuing or further implementing this. And so Diane, Kathy, all of the staff have tried to make sure we are a lean organization. But I'm now 5 years in of hearing Diane talk about being awake at night worrying, spending extra time developing strategies, visions, and roadmaps. And frankly, I think we need to invest in a couple of more strategic resources to help balance that out. And you know, we worry about our workforce. Well, for the board, she's our workforce. And I think we need to invest in a couple of more strategic resources. We're also going to have a transition as her chief of staff retires and managing that. And we organizationally have had the benefit of Mark's career at Clean Water Services. So it's a double whammy. So anyway, I'm a little too long-winded now. I just wanted to put a marker in.
Okay, great, thank you. So Kathy, last year at the Budget Committee, we talked about the workforce and the increase in wages. You talked about raising the scale. So looking back a year, are increases higher than we expected or about where we expected? And what are you foreseeing for the next year?
Well, in 23 was actually the first year under a new union contract. So in 23, we needed to put in place the changes that happened through that agreement. They really reflect the labor environment that we're in and the competitiveness in filling positions. So we needed to move forward with some of those changes, like picking up of the IIP, the COLA, and just change in pay structure. And of course, the class and comp to be competitive, just to recruit and retain, and along with some of the training and development that we're putting in place. So I see that as, that was this new baseline, that now going forward, it'll be reflected in these numbers.
So we as the board have approved these things, and now it's the budget implementing it, and us seeing it as the budget committee, right?
Yes, yes.
So what we do is we manage both what we appropriate into the programs, but also what we hold in contingency, because not all positions will be filled in any given year. So we do hold some of the increases in staffing within contingency. So what you'll see is when we move it out of contingency and then put it into the next year's budget, that there is this movement. So the first year's a partial year, usually, because not all people are hired at the first of the fiscal year. And then it becomes the full year the very next. And so we're managing between what we have in contingency and what we're appropriating, and only spending what it is that we need to spend.
At Washington County as an agency, we're changing our management on the books because it's taking over 85 days to fill a position. Do you have, what's your experience at CWS? Do you know?
Jack, do you know the average to fill vacancy? Yeah, we can ask Holly. I think for some positions, it's a lot longer, right? And for other positions, it's shorter, but we could get that average out. And I think it's going to lean higher on the technical positions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Kathy, this increases that you're showing here would probably be mostly reflected in your utility operations?
Oh, no, it's across the board.
So
Yeah.
the business services, I'm just looking at your tabs here.
Yeah, so it's
right
across.
the board. I was thinking
It
the
really is.
union contract might fit more under the utility, but.
Yeah. Some of the union allowances, they were brought over for all non-rep too, so it's spread throughout the, and really, the class and comp, the non-rep is going to happen this year for them too, so yeah. Okay, for material and services, we have a 14.8% increase. Some of the key areas and drivers for that were when our insurance costs, we see those going up about $564,000. That's primarily due to the valuation at Durham Water Resource Recovery, as well as the addition of cybersecurity insurance there. On the chemical cost side, we see an increase of just under $1 million at 21.7%, and that reflects expenditure to meet regulatory requirements, ongoing supply chain issues, and inflation there. Similarly, on the energy cost side, increase about $820,000. That's a combination of rate increases and then regulatory compliance requirements. That's in particular on air emissions that impact the ability to operate Rock Creek cogeneration equipment and requires additional electrical purchases. On the software licensing side, we see an increase of about $248,000, 11.6% increase, and that reflects an additional investment in modern technology and data management, workflow automation, and cybersecurity to support Clean Water Services' growing operations and mitigate security risk. On the contract and professional services side, we see an increase of about $2.4 million, or 29%. This is related to investment in a wider range of knowledgeable experts to solve complex business and operational challenges, and also to bridge some of the vacancy gaps during this challenging time of recruitment for key positions. We are having a difficult time filling with candidates.
Quick question. I'm wondering about the possibility, either in this next permit, how many years out will it be? 5 years out? Or the one after that? I'm going to your point that you shared about how our cogeneration, it will need to be phased out, and electrical purchases. And I believe what's in my layperson's vocabulary or brain, that part of what is driving that, there's equipment costs and amortization and all of that, but also greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'm wondering if the permitting cycle into the future might be honing in on measuring your greenhouse gas emissions, but I'm concerned that at the policy level, given that you're investing in an avoidance, either in a capital cost or in an operating cost, how that might be carried forward. So, because it's a trade-off then, right? Because what I'm worried about is that they're going to be looking at GHG emissions and saying, no, you gotta keep lowering that, but at the same time saying, well, you also have to reduce your electrical use and just keep charging. The bottom result is it just keeps driving at the rate structure. I don't know if maybe I'm being too pessimistic.
No, it's a whole system of decisions, right? So for instance, our Durham facility is okay to do cogeneration because the technology of the engine generator sets meets current air toxic requirements. Our Rock Creek engine generator sets, we were at that decision point. We don't meet air toxics invest in brand-new cogeneration units, or in this case, it's a better decision to invest in renewable natural gas. But then it creates the other greenhouse gas emission issue, right, of buying more electricity. So for wastewater treatment facilities or water resource recovery facilities like ours, we are at the starting point of really understanding the greenhouse gas emissions. It's really N2O that's an issue that's coming out of biological nutrient removal facilities. So there's several research projects that EPA and the Water Research Foundation is commencing that we're involved in to better understand the trade-offs of the decisions. So that's why our climate action plan is very practical and pragmatic, right? We make the decisions we need to make because we have to adapt to be resilient, but yet we can calculate what the offset is for N2O and for greenhouse gas. So we're learning as the industry is learning, and there is an initiative in our climate action plan that you'll look at. It's this hunt to get to net zero. So we can produce enough or offset enough through biogas sales that it reduces our footprint. And of course, we have all of the trees that we continue to plant within the watershed. And SES is looking at, can we sequester carbon within peat bogs? So we're looking at the entire constellation and system to get at this issue. It's really an exciting time. I think the team is very excited about all of this. So that's what you're going to find. We're attacking the system. Yeah.
You said several things there that were key points to make me feel comfortable. Thank you.
So that's on the operating side. Next, we're going to talk about the capital improvement plan. Once again, talking about setting that new baseline, the budget has $86.8 million in expenditures for capital investments, and that's 11% decrease from the prior year. This is that approach to new budget we talked about in the past. We've used a just-in-time delivery model in which we fully budget a capital project to serve potential economic growth. The projects were only initiated if the growth need occurred. This resulted in times where the appropriation was higher than what we spent because we just didn't need to deliver on those projects. Historically, less than 75% of the CIP budget was spent at year end under this just-in-time approach, just so you're aware. So in '24, we have a new approach. It's based on new planned sequence delivery approach. And in there, we're identifying only active and on-schedule projects that we budget as part of the project cost in that year. And we additionally are budgeting a higher level of contingency in those years to cover any unanticipated new development that comes on board. Those will require board action to initiate. So this is showing you our CIP plan. Right in there, you see the 22-23 budget as proposed, and related contingencies. You can see in 23-24 then a change, and we're talking about the change in how we're budgeting. You see a reduction in capital appropriated, but you see an increase in the grayed out area to the side of contingency to allow for access if we do have a developer-driven project come on board. You see that carried out in 25 through 28 projections. You do see a shadowed area there in 26 through 28. That reflects, we're still refining our capital project based on completion of the West Basin Master Plan and integration of East Basin numbers. So these are anticipated CIP projects based on our best estimates at this time.
Kathy, how has the CHIPS Act impacted the gray line, the gray bars?
So currently in our CIP, we do not show the impact of that potential North Hillsborough industrial growth. That would be something we would need to incorporate in our planning.
And we have been working with, Joe Gall has been working with the city of Hillsborough as well as North Plains, because both those sites have been identified for an addition of, if they add 500 acres out here, they're going to need that infrastructure, power, roads. Water and sewer is very, very expensive. So we're trying to anticipate those. We have done some preliminary cost estimates on what that would be, but they're not baked into this yet.
Probably just a timing matter, but we can assume that that gray bar will probably adjust up in next year's cycle of charts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it depends upon how that moves along, but assuming it does move along, yes, I think you'd see that go up.
Or with a supplemental budget.
And with that comes money, so, revenue. So I think it was how much? Almost $750 million? Yeah,
Billion.
$750 million, so less than $1 billion, but getting close to that number.
But I wanted to make sure we heard B versus
B, yeah, it's $750 million, yeah.
billions, you know.
Yeah, yeah. But,
Just for my edification, can I ask you, what do you find as a threshold for a CIP project?
You mean what would be included in a CIP project?
What is your threshold? I mean, you must have $100,000 worth of computer technology you're not throwing. How are you defining your CIP program?
Well, that incorporates both replacement, renewal, and new construction. And we don't have a specific dollar limit short of the $5,000 capitalization threshold. But so in replacement renewal, you can have projects that are $5,000 to $25,000, and in the construction funds, they're larger. They're usually 50 to million.
Minimum capitalization.
So the minimum capitalization is 500,000 right now for us.
You say 500?
Excuse me, 5,000. Sorry, 5,000. Yeah, 5,000. Sorry. Yeah.
How much is 5,000 and below? Just out of curiosity, just off the top.
what does it buy?
No, how many dollars in the budget would be? How many capital assets would you buy at 5,000 below?
There aren't many. Most of them are over that. Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
like computers, the whole computer program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't capitalize those, obviously. They have less than a
Writing them off.
3-year life, yeah. So we just put those in operating, yeah.
So really, it's that it's greater than 5K and it has a lifespan of greater than 3 years.
Yeah.
Is the
Yes.
inflection
Yes.
point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So just as a reminder, you have in the budget document on page 326 through 342, you have that summary of all of the CIP projects.
Wait, say that again?
And so in your budget document, pages 326 through 342, that's that summary of all the capital projects for the year. But you also have, you are provided with the CIP planning book that provides that same summary for sanitary sewer and surface water management, but provides the narrative detail on that. So I'm going to turn it over to Logan to talk a little bit about this next slide.
Good morning. Just briefly review, as you can see, what we are showing on slide 3 are the key projects within the capital program, large dollar values that occur over multiple years. This is clearly not all of our capital program, but it's some of the big key projects. So as you can see, it's broken down between sanitary sewer and surface water management projects. I believe the committee is familiar with Ripple. You can see that that's a multi-year project, currently budgeted at around $47 million for the total project cost. Springer Street is another building envelope that's intended to house expansion of field operations, construction crews that serve our entire surface area. That's budgeted at $13.7 million. We have several primary clarifier projects occurring throughout the district, but the largest one is occurring on Block 3. This will also include a reconstruction of that intersection that's been long awaited, and that's at 14.7. The Pano Creek Interceptor Rehabilitation Project, this is, of course, there's I-9s, it's also the line that helps serve one of our issues with the city of Portland and the sewer pump station. It is currently projected at a $30 million level, and then, of course, our very fun UFAT project.
UFAT?
UFAT. It's,
Spell it out.
it relates to the ability for us to produce enough volatile fatty acids, so it's an underflow filtration activated thickener. I think I have that right.
That's what I was looking for.
It's to make fatty volatile acids that the bugs need to eat.
So that's what helps.
Sounds good, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to make it sound nice, but it really isn't the way to make it sound nice. Essentially, we're taking some of the floating fats, oils, and grease, and we ferment it, so it's rather ridiculous.
Sorry, I just wanted to know what the acronym stood for.
Oh, thank you. I started thinking
Not
about
the
process there. Essentially,
paragraphs.
What we do with this fermented liquid is it helps in the biological phosphorus removal process and how the organism uptake the phosphorus.
No abbreviations.
Yes, thank you. The surface water management projects, as you can see, some of these are ongoing, 23 through 28 sub-basin. As our CEO mentioned, we're currently going through review of our surface and stormwater program, and we anticipate revisions to our sub-basin planning, as well as our stormwater outfall retrofit program. So some people may be familiar with, we have installed storm flow monitors on some of our basins to help control storm flows through those. The SWIM, surface water management, heavy vehicle replacement, we have quite a few basins that we have to maintain. So those are heavy vehicles that go into all of the, I guess you could call it need abatement, removal, cleaning up those facilities. And of course, the programmatic sub-basin and surface water management. And finally, one of the specific projects, better than breaking the area, stormwater, 219, that's a stormwater project. There are a number of projects throughout the capital improvement plan. If you have any specific questions related to them, I'm happy to discuss those. Or if you have any questions related to this slide.
Much of the $47 million on the Ripple project has already been spent.
I believe we've expended a little under $2 million at this point, related to the design and planning.
So the actual acquisition of that building was not part of that.
Oh, yes, we acquired it,
Yeah, that was that purchase in 2019, about 2.3 million for the property.
yes, it is a major overhaul. The way I like to think about it is 2/3 of that structure will be utilized for our laboratory and our research and innovation departments. So they're currently housed in the ABC building, and that building has met its lifespan for serving those programs. So it's a pretty significant upgrade to ensure that not only do we meet the existing needs of our water quality program, but ensure that we continue to do so for the coming decades. And as we've mentioned, I'm sure many times, and you're aware, PFAS, PFOA are just one of the constituents of emerging concern that we're faced with, as well as many other issues that Diane has alluded to related to stormwater monitoring and TMDLs and just any number of topics. So it's certainly a significant investment, but it's a critical one for the future of the utility.
Right, so it's just not a building for people, it's a laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you remind me, what does ABC stand for?
Administrative Building Complex,
Oh, that's right.
yes.
And how old is that building?
So the lab portion of that building was completed in 1996, and then we added the area that the other part in 2003. So there's been 2 phases there.
Okay. When is that building going to need entire envelope upgrades, HVAC changes, all those?
We're currently evaluating that now.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And a lot of that timing will also occur with Ripple, because they're going to move a big, heavy-use group, the lab, out of that building, so that area will be repurposed in some way, too.
So we're going to know, will we know more for next year's budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Logan, you only do the, I shouldn't say only, it's a big job. You do the plants, you don't do the conveyance system at all.
Yes, sir, I do. Both.
Is that correct?
Yes, I do both.
Oh, you do both?
Yes, I'm responsible for the operations of the district on an interim basis right now, yes.
don't expect you to answer me precisely. And this may be another one that the chair's gonna say, well, Roy, let's take it offline, but I suspect, short of us getting some agreements with the cities, that the amount of capital improvements necessary for transmission lines, which is millions and, I should say millions of miles, it's probably not that much, but it's a lot of miles, would significantly change these numbers, because there's a lot of lines out there that are not the big transmission lines going to the plant, but the smaller lines doing the feeds. Do you, just real quickly, in a sense, is my assumption correct, and is there a larger discussion to be held at some point about all of those lines are going to be in need of some repair at some point?
I can help with that, Logan. So what Roy's talking about is what is our long-term obligation to manage the conveyance system assets. One of my things that keeps me up at night is we seem to have the propensity to replace those assets at about 40 years, and I have a growing concern about that. Normally, those assets would have a useful life up in the order of 80 to 90 to even 100 years. So you're absolutely right. As part of the East Basin Plan, master plans, and the West Basin master plans, the team is evaluating the needs for the conveyance system. I'm not seeing yet anything that is astounding me, but I do believe that we need to invest more in infiltration and inflow removal. We tend to choose to convey it and treat it, which means you're building bigger pipelines and bigger treatment plants. So the team is going to be refining that technical piece. And the very first one is that Fano Creek Interceptor Rehabilitation Project. Right now, you see a little asterisk there that says the scope of work under refinement. The order of magnitude that they're actually proposing is on a $130 million magnitude. A substantial part of that is infiltration and inflow. So Logan has made contact with a team at Xylem that does advanced analysis on infiltration and inflow, and they find other solutions that have saved folks like the city of Buffalo. Director Treese had O.J. McAfoy that was there. They saved on the order of $60 million by utilizing this advanced way of looking. So,
Diane, and I know we're not getting down to all the numbers, but I think the philosophies are the more interesting things. Is it fair to say some criticism leveled at us in terms of our reserves? But when you're talking about the kinds of improvements, either we're going to have to go through a substantial bonding program, or those reserves are going to come in awfully handy as we start.
Absolutely. Those reserves are necessary to manage rate increases well into the future, because it provides, one, cash flow for debt service, two, it provides cash flow for pay as you go. So you'll notice when the capital improvement program was bumping up and down, we're able to streamline that by using those resources. So thank you for asking that question. I'll know more in about 1.5 years what the total obligation is on the conveyance side. But we need to have much longer service lives than we're actually accomplishing right now.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So what I'm trying to understand at my level, which I think also helps for our community, is the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I didn't finish my notes, so I'm not going to remember this. But also trying to remember, you know, there are lines, a bit of the vocabulary, the role of interceptors and pipes and flows. So there's something about the design, and I don't mean technical design, but the design of understanding that I need some help in revisiting.
It's the rainwater and the groundwater that's getting into the conveyance systems.
But I understand that for the infill and
Infiltration.
Yes, thank you. But is that all that interceptors do? Is really the question that comes to my mind.
Yeah,
So-
they move water from the homes and the
Yeah.
businesses to the, our facilities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So they're the pipelines.
Oh,
Yeah, they're the pipelines.
why do we
They're the
use a
freeways.
fancy word like interceptor?
That's the engineers, right? We got interceptors, trunk lines, the local line,
Like the freeways and arterials and.
collectors, yeah, and local,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. For some reason, I thought interceptors were like some special connectors.
No, big pipe.
Yeah. Oh, silly me. Okay, thank you.
Is our older infrastructure more susceptible to infiltration?
Yes,
Within what we put in the ground now?
yes, the quality of the pipeline, right, the joints, so push-on joints versus the plastic joints with bells and gaskets are stronger. So it's the age of the system and the materials that was used, but my biggest issue is the concrete pipe that was used to build the big interceptors when we were constructed. We're just not getting the longevity that we need, and we'll work on that. I think there's some really great minds. We need to be metering our pump stations. We don't have that data. We need to be advancing our flow monitoring within our conveyance systems. We do have technology things that we need to begin investing in to get at this issue. Yeah.
I think from my standpoint, the importance of that condensing of the multiple pages that we see back from 326 to 342, it was hard for me to find those items. I found the Rock Creek primary, and to Matt's question of how much of the Ripple have we expended versus what's the timeline on that? I can't find Ripple in this.
So it's called Innovation Center in the listing, unfortunately, yeah.
You changed it, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That was the original title.
Okay, oh,
Yeah.
there it is, the Innovation Center, that's on whatever 7018 is.
Yeah, and it won't tie to the 47 million because some of the years have dropped off on that summary that you see, so it shows less.
It shows
there.
44.5.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the total, including the
Yeah.
purchase.
So it's close, I wouldn't, I mean, the Rock Creek tied out to the 8.2, but anyway, no, there's a lot of data here. I appreciate the summarization of the primary projects here, but I was having trouble making that connection.
That's one of the improvements to make this a better community-facing document. So that's what the team is going to be working on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Logan.
So next, we're going to look at the financial forecast. You show here 2 years of actual, the estimated 23, proposed for 24, and projected years out 25 through 27. So the bar graph there, those are the expenditures by year. The blue line, that's our revenue trending. The numbers above that blue line at 4.02, 4.9, 6.66, that's our debt coverage ratio. So that's the amount of times our net income covers our debt service in any given year. Our covenant is at 1.2, so we have a very strong debt coverage ratio at over 4. So obviously giving us opportunities for leveraging and doing additional debt service if we needed to. The dotted line up above, that's the fund balance. So you see in 21 and 22, you see that fund balance increasing. That really is a reflection of, the sequencing and deployment of capital projects in those years, along with, similarly the sequencing of labor adds during those years as we tried to deflect the impacts of that rate reduction in 20. But as you see, it climbs up. So in 24, you see that big peak there. That is the reflection of that $50 million bond issuance going into funds. And you see it over the years then being spent down on projects in the capital program to where you go down into 27, it levels back out there.
So considering the bond market right now and interest rates, playing around. Do we have any flex in there of potentially pushing that 50 million?
Yes. Definitely, and that's what reserves give us the opportunity to do, yes. Yeah. Okay.
But could you also speak to, given Clean Water Services excellence, given that it is a rate-paying utility structure, do you imagine that there might be bond premiums or just quick sale?
So we did, when we put together our financial plan on the debt issuance, we talked with our municipal advisor, and the estimates they were giving, as usual, we do see premium in that issuance and low interest rates, yes.
Interest rates have to come down before that.
Yeah, yeah. Not right now.
It's good to be prepared and watch when we want to enter. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The bond market, when the interest rate was low, was a great place to go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully we get back there.
Well, I don't know. Politically, it just seems continuing uncertainty for, in my mind, out for another 2-3 years.
So that's why I asked the question, because I think you're right.
Yeah.
I'm stuck in this for a while. So
Yep.
we have flex in there, which we
Yep.
do. That's good.
Should do a refunding issue, that's what you're talking about, right?
No, it would be a new issuance. We were looking
New
at,
issue.
in particular, to the Ripple building. Yeah,
Only if the timing is right.
but yeah, if time's right. Okay. So my final slide here, it's, this is just depicting for you that how Clean Water Services is able to stabilize rates over time. So the blue line, that's us, 2014 through 2024. The other lines, those are water utilities in the area, so Beaverton Water, Hillsborough, and TVWD. So you kind of see the rate spiking that needs to happen for them in order to meet their capital and investments. We've been fortunate in our budgeting practices to be able to keep those increases stable over time and still cash fund some of our capital investments.
And that's why the strategy that we started since the 90s, it's really paying dividends. It's this decadal look at where you need to go, having adequate reserves to stabilize rates. It's a really great strategy. I think it helps our other partners that have to pay for these other investments that were done on a shorter scale. So we're able to be consistent. Yeah.
So who here is, I'm just going to go through the list, a Beaverton Water customer? Who here is a Hillsborough Water customer? Who here is a Tualatin Valley Water District customer? Who here is a Clean Water, who here is a CWS local customer? Cool, thank you. Others?
Portland. So could I ask a question here, Chair? So when I look at this rate stabilization chart, and I think this might be what you're getting at, Catherine, is, with our billing structure and how things go for us, what impacts is TVWD's rate increases going to have just in our customer base for us?
So in particular,
That's a really big
yeah.
climb.
So in particular, because we joint bill with Tualatin Valley Water District, so they receive a bill that includes water along with sanitary sewer and storm. So yeah, and we're aware of that. We're working with TVWD. They have an initiative right now to go to monthly billing. So they're looking to help stabilize, level out rates for customers by lowering the monthly rather than the overarching.
I guess what I'm saying is that their customer service issues are ours to some degree as well.
Yes, that's true.
So I just, as we're thinking into the future, I want to make sure we're looking at how do we help in any way to stabilize TVWD.
It's so big, no such thing. It's all,
I think
all the UUAs that are part of TVWD, They better be managing their household budgets now.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. I'm just
think
putting
when-
that out there into the universe.
Yeah, I think one way we're helping is sharing in the cost of joint billing. It saves our ratepayers. And then sharing in that utility billing system together, and potentially down the road, some of the AMI that they'd be looking at, so, yeah.
My point is, we can't do anything more than what we've already been doing. It's, the well is dry there. And I don't want to mislead anybody in thinking we can do more. Yeah. I'm Ms. Gloom and Doom in answering it.
Is there a map somewhere in the budget or that y'all have that maps out the service areas, particularly for TVWD?
They would in their budget.
Yeah.
Right. And we can talk offline after that. I don't need to take a deep dive on that.
Yeah, we can take a look at that talk at the break here shortly, too.
Is volatility in the Hillsborough and Beaverton rate more geared towards the water portion of their rate or their sanitary portion?
To walk.
Water, because Hillsborough is joined with Tualatin Valley Water District in going to the Willamette for a water source, so that's some of those costs related to that.
Hillsborough projected a 10% rate increase every year for 10 years, and we're beyond that 10 years. So it was an eyes wide open thing, but we're now kind of dealing with that as we open up our billings every month and go, wow. But I have artificial turf, so I'm glad I'm not watering it. But yeah, anticipating those costs, and that's where that is.
And I don't want
Those
that.
few select areas in the city of Hillsborough that are TVWD customers are getting hit harder.
Yeah, and I guess I need you to answer this. Is that because TVWD didn't do this 10-year projection and saying, we know rates are going to go up, so we're going to just incorporate that into the mindset every year? Did they not take that? Or what was their philosophical approach to this?
I can't answer that question for them.
Yeah, okay.
So the reason we put that slide up is that we don't want that to be Clean Water Services' future, right? We want to plan for this next technology push way beforehand, so. And that's really, thank you to the team. The team does that.
Oh,
think
and
long.
I think I'm also remembering too, TVWD is a service district. That's all they do. Yeah, water, right?
Yeah.
Elaine?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Before we close this part, I have a couple of broad comments and a very specific question. Broad comment number one, very early on in the presentation where you talked about the priorities, you had, recruiting and retaining talent at the very top. I'd just like to make a suggestion that you consider moving DEI from the bottom of the list and putting it right below the talent. It's just one of those things that tends to come at the end of lists. And I just want to advocate for a little more elevation of that. In the department roadmaps, you may be heading toward this some way or other, but again, looking at your DEI work, it may be appropriate, rather than simply within the HR or business office area, to have specific DEI goals. Consider putting them in every department's roadmap, because at some point in time, the goal, I presume, is to have the full agency reflective of the full community. And those might be ways to help elevate the attention on that. Now, from a very specific question, on page 68, the top 10 water users, I have to ask, why is Heritage Mobile Home Park one of the top 10 water users, or top 10 consumers?
So one of the things that's interesting about Heritage Mobile Home Park is they have a single meter. So it may be an entire community, but there's just one water meter there, so it doesn't go to individual homes. So it's kind of like having a neighborhood meter. So that's why it ends up there.
And I'm guessing it's because there's also landscaping and turf is why that mobile home park would stand out as opposed to large apartment building structures or something. of that.
Yes, although, the usage rate, the usage portion of the sewer rate is, we gathered that between November and April because we want to exclude outdoor water usage. And so we only are counting we hope we're only counting indoor water usage. So
If
that would
I
not-
might suggest that we put an asterisk and a note on that future page that at least estimates how many households are in that mobile home park.
EDUs, yeah, right.
Not precisely,
Yeah.
but at a general level, because, and notes that it's one water meter for approximately 50 or 100 or 150, I'm talking gross level again, number of households. Yeah.
Because it really stands out.
Yep.
Whereas in an apartment community, each building would have a separate meter, you're just not adding them up.
Depends, yeah.
Okay, at this time, we invite public comments, if we have anyone here or on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Would any members in the room, in the auditorium, wish to provide public comment on any sections gone over in the budget so far? I'll ask you to raise your hand or start coming forward. Not seeing anyone in the room. Would any member viewing this meeting online via Zoom like to provide public comment on what you've heard so far for up to 2 minutes to this budget committee? Give you just a moment to utilize the raise hand function. Not seeing any hands, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. I think at this point, we will take a 15-minute break, return at 11:15.
You've done an amazing job of estimating.
On time.
Look at that, Mark. 11. You're right on, you're like right on.
You're right. I was thinking 10:45.
Yeah, we don't overlay it, but we could get him one.
Residential.
Good job.
Cool, thanks.
Nice job, Ken.
Thank you.
The big numbers.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if so somebody late night tonight can watch it. Yeah, right. Yeah. Tonight, since all the writers are on strike, there's nothing on tonight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been.
Where was that presentation?
I met her through, I serve on the Realtor Association leadership, and so we met through PAC meeting when we endorsed and supported her campaign. So she's kind of like, hey, Alex, you know. And I live in her community, so we just kind of got to know each other.
Utility operations.
It's yours.
It's ours.
Right? She lives out in Aloha.
Yeah.
You live in Beaverton.
Yeah, yeah. I moved. I used to live by her in Aloha. Then I moved. So, yeah. Yeah. So what, and I mean, you've been obviously, I just know because you got a whole street after you.
Now, this is my first year on the commission. I don't know.
Not true. Can't be true. Is it really?
I'm messing with you again.
No, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, and I'm very gullible. I'll just believe
No,
whatever you
you're
say.
not. You're just being polite. That's all. You're not gullible at all.
Like, okay, if he says so.
Yeah, the guy's crazy, so I'll believe you, Roy. No.
Yeah.
You've been around this way.
Yeah.
Saw lots of evolution.
No, it's just amazing to see just the River Terrace development bloom and more coming and down Shoals Ferry. It's just, you know?
Yeah, a little too much too fast.
Yeah, it's a lot.
For me. Maybe you like it. As a realtor, you'd like it, but I mean, at some point you kind of say, you got to balance it. It can't be this rocketing and then...
Thank you. Yeah, I try. It's because I'm leaning in it.
No, not River Terrace, no, but I have a lot of clients in those communities.
Yeah, you have a hard job. I don't.
Close to it,
Yeah, and, but just, you know, the exponential, what we see now with crime, with just accidents in general, you know, I don't know, I don't know what needs to happen. As I said, it's really fast.
We need to get rid of people and just have robots.
Right? It's like, is nobody hearing me?
I'm going to attribute that line to you.
I apologize.
I don't believe it, but I'll say you do. You're saying,
What, Dick just kind of would avoid the microphone as much as he could?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just read this, I was hearing on the news this morning.
I'm loud enough, I think, but maybe not.
You're loud enough for in here.
Explosive growth of AI technology, and now they're trying to scale us all back.
Okay,
Slow us back
well, I'll
down.
try.
oh, yeah.
You know, which,
Roy's got nothing left to add.
but gotta be some control around that.
Well, your social engineering, and I get that, everybody wants to, but I think what they see is probably one of the biggest revolutions was the Industrial Revolution, and that even came here in terms of, you remember we imported tons of people from all nations to be slaves or worker bees, and they came out with cotton gin, they came out with locomotive, didn't need them, and so all of that would have disappeared in a few years. Not that it was ever right, but it all would have disappeared. Now we're looking and saying, what do we do with you're a slave? I mean, we're all a slave to an income. I mean, we got to live, right? So what happens when those jobs are all displaced? So why would I need a realtor if I can go online and have some avatar talk to me and say, go to that house if you want to look at it, the keys are right there. Here's your individual code on the lockbox. It'll change, much like a key on a, change that code, you'll go in, you'll observe things, give me some feedback, and by the way, my fees are a third what a realtor's old fees were. You're going, no, I don't like that world. So what happens when we take all these jobs away? What are we going to do with them?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think of the you know, movies that I can relate to, at least, you know, when you look at like, yeah, we're all
Say
just
hello
gonna
to this guy. Hi, Bob, I thought you were gone.
Pretty soon. But my wife wanted me to make sure I came up and said hi to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Tell her hello and tell her hello from Adrian as well.
Yeah, what Susie said.
I know, I said, she doesn't care about me, I care about my wife.
I'll tell that, I'll make your day.
So what are you really gonna do? You're gonna contract back a little bit, aren't you?
I don't know what my plans are yet. You know, the worst things in life, like the work
No
you
problem.
do.
No problem. I don't have much to comment. So.
Yeah, I don't see myself just quitting.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, no big deal.
Ours had, between you guys, there might be.
Oh, for sure. We talked about that.
I thought about tapping the mic for Roy to turn his on, because I don't think he was on when he was speaking.
Right now, we had one of my goals was to make sure that
Okay.
the regulatory affairs program was real stable before I left.
Yeah.
And we got a couple positions to hire and that kind of thing.
Why were you ever stable?
I don't know.
Because you know how things change.
Yeah,
You know
things-
that.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I got the people now, but the regulations changed. Well, now the regulations are slowed, but I don't have the people. It'll never stop.
Hope springs eternal.
I know, I
Yeah.
know. I just don't think it'll ever be stable because it's just subject to too much legislation.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah. And
Somebody's new idea of the month, a week, a day, or
well, at least every 3 or 4 years, 2 to 4 years, when things change, it all changes us, but.
you know, it'd be a good gig for you. I don't know that she would agree or anybody would agree, but a good gig would be kind of a glide pattern like this.
Yeah.
Instead of this. Not that you're interested, or I don't know what you're thinking, but it would be hard. I know my wife would always say, well, go to you'd go crazy. And I said, that's right. So what is that pattern look like? Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it makes all kinds of sense. And, I'd like to do somewhat of a glide path, so we start stepping back just so we don't have so many hours committed.
Yeah.
Part-time and maybe a little bit more of a clear support role, I guess.
Yeah, that would be, I think that's well said. That's very well said. So one, define the hours, and two, define what the role is. So you
Yep.
can sit there and say, sure, you can go halftime, but here's the load. And you kind of go, well, it's impossible to go.
To balance that.
Yeah.
And that's ideally what I'd like.
I think that would be great. Well, I hope you guys work something out. It would be a shame to.
I hope we will. Uh-oh.
Okay, we've got to get Kevin over here first as the clerk. Why don't we get settled here? Do I get the clicker? Oh, there we go. No, I don't think it's
No, just the one, and then use your napkin, no, Roy, no.
I thought she had joined.
Yeah, you can.
I know what that says for me.
That part.
work her other job.
We prepare to reconvene.
So as we prepare to reconvene, I want to say a couple of things. Our YouTube audience has been in contact with us saying, speak into the microphone. So particularly those of you here, I think always keep the light on green, because if you're back, it doesn't really pick you up that much. And when you do speak, you don't have to be super close. But if you could make sure you're speaking into the microphone, that would be helpful so they can hear the questions.
Okay. Next up, Mark.
Thank you, Chair Song. What we're going to start doing now is we're going to get into discussion of our operating budget. This year, in this year's 2023-24 budget, we've reorganized our budget into two functional areas: a business services functional area and a utility operations functional area. And that functional area approach is really there to support our ongoing work related to implementing the cost of services study allocations. This allows us to track back costs better on a regional and local basis, as well as that allocation between the sanitary sewer and the surface water management program. The business services functional area includes 9 departments that support clean water services operations and service to our customers, and you'll see them there. And we'll be stepping through each of these departments today. Yes, Director Treese.
Could I just ask a quick question here? Because this was one of my questions on my list, and it's about these two areas. On page 18, it says the business services functional areas, there's 7, but yet in the chart on page 44, there's 9. And I just wanted
So
a little picky Pam here.
No, that's a very good question. So what happened is we had a business services department last year. That department has now been transferred into 7 new departments, or broken into 7 departments. We had 2 existing ones that are now just being organized under the business services function, which is regional utility services, which Joe manages, and our regulatory affairs department, which Bob Baumgartner manages. Appreciate you doing the math on that, but. So in other words,
I'm back on page 44 versus 18. So the 2 that I didn't see represented on page 18, and I think this is what you're saying, are regulatory affairs and regional utility services.
Okay. On page 44?
On page 44, the 2 that aren't represented on page 18 under the first paragraph are those 2.
Yes.
And that's tracking that. Okay.
I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for the confusion.
Well, it's not a big issue, but I just wanted to understand.
Clarity is very important. So, so we've got the business services functional areas, as I told you before. There's 7 new ones and 2 existing departments that sit underneath that functional area. And then utility operations functional area is really where our operating units, direct operational focus, and there's 4 there. We're going to talk about the business services functional areas this morning, everything but regulatory affairs, and then this afternoon we will go through, after lunch, we'll go through those other pieces. So again, our picture from page 44, right? This is the business services functional areas. These are the 9 departments there. They represent 197 FTE. And a total budget of $51.1 million. So about 43% of our operating budget sits within this area here. Now what we'll do is we want to go through each of the individual departments, and each of the executives, we manage these departments on a portfolio basis, our executive team does. So each of the executives that have those portfolios will be presenting. And I will be presenting on behalf of the Office of the CEO. So this is our year-over-year piece. Much of this, the FTE change, is the consolidation of all our executive team and budgeted within the Office of the Executive Chief Executive Officer. We changes in materials and services is driven a lot by we're transferring a lot of previous community engagement, outreach, and education work that was in our natural systems enhancement and stewardship program over to the community engagement and communications group. So here are the 5 programs that are within the office of the CEO. Administrative Services, which is led by Stephanie Morrison, who's here. Communications and Community Engagement, Culture, Equity, and Learning. And we also broke out the Government Affairs program as its own program this year. Major changes to those 5 programs, or any changes, the most significant one within the Office of the CEO is the Chief Financial Officer and the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer are 2 positions that are now budgeted within that program. So we have our entire executive team there, together with the executive assistant to the CEO. On the communications and community engagement side, again, that was the thing I talked about earlier. We are really looking for how do we centralize and align our community engagement, education, and outreach program. So part of that is under our new community engagement manager. We are transferring $433,000 of funding from Natural Systems Enhancement and Stewardship Program to centralize within our community engagement program. The other change is the establishment of the Government Affairs program. That's Tracy Rainey. She manages our state and federal government relations and legislative affairs. And that funding and that FTE was a transfer from, they used to be housed within the communications and community engagement area. They have different functions, so we put that elsewhere.
I might just be having difficulty with a term. Natural systems enhancement and stewardship. One of the things you've tried to ensure that I understand is that we've had a big building phase over the years of planting a lot of materials. Well, we have to, quote unquote, maintain the value of that, hence stewardship.
Yes.
And so I just realized I'm sort of scratching my head. From a communications and community engagement standpoint, I get natural system enhancement and stewardship transferring in. But from a stewardship standpoint, it sounds very operational. How do we study the success of that? How do we use techniques to offset for things like that ash borer beetle? Feels operational and shouldn't be under communications and community engagement.
And it is not. The Natural Systems Enhancement and Stewardship is its own department in our operational group. What we're doing is we're transferring $443,000 worth of professional services contracts.
For C.
Funding
CE.
that will be
Got it.
aligned under our community
Okay, so
engagement
it's
program.
not all, it's just some.
No, I mean, this is our agreements with
For some
Friends of Trees. They do a
Yes.
lot of our work, and Wetlands Conservancy, Audubon, pieces like that.
Thank you.
Yes. The other 2 programs that are within the Office of the CEO also include the Culture, Equity, and Learning Program, which we stood up last year, and we talked about that pretty extensively, where we're looking at increasing employee engagement and inclusion, really the belonging piece and the culture, integrating equity considerations into our business practices, and really growing and developing our talent through a learning program. That's kind of the next major phase. Now, Elaine, you mentioned in the roadmaps, if you look at the roadmap for this particular program, for instance, out there is departmental equity numbers. So if you look at where they're going there, you also see the growing of the learning program on that side. And then administrative services is a centralized business practice and policies across our organization. We have multiple locations. They are all, the admin staff are all managed under a single person, and that's Stephanie Morrison. That group is also the liaison for the county administrative office in support of the CEO and myself. What you're going to see here is really just a slide to pause, okay? Because you're going to see this slide 6 more times. You're going to say, hold it, legal isn't on there. This is just some numbers out of business services. The same slide's going to come after legal and research and innovation and digital services and whatnot. It has been updated based on some of the numbers we provided for you last year. So that is all I have. And I believe I've got Mr. Linder, our general counsel, will be up next.
So if we had some questions, do you want to wait on that?
No, absolutely. You could talk, ask questions right now.
Well, I think the difficulty I had was reading the narrative and then reading the numbers. And if I was to skip the narrative, it would look like there's a pretty significant increase in the office of CEO, when in reality, you've explained why those are there, not necessarily a quantitative calculation. So I guess I would, whenever I see that overall Office of CEO is up 32.8%, you know, the revenues are up 20, so in other words, we're spending a lot of money, but there's a reason for that, but it really isn't very well explained in the numbers.
Well, that's
okay?
why you can't look at the numbers alone. You got to look at the narrative.
I did read the narrative.
I know you
Catherine.
did.
Just a second, okay, just a second, okay. I'm just saying, I'm gonna be Joe Public, and I'm gonna come back over and I'm gonna look at the Office of CEO and say, wow, what happened there? And does all the narrative equal the increase in cost? And I'm not sure I connected those dots, but I couldn't put numbers to it. I couldn't put numbers to the positions you're moving. The $433,000 transfer, I didn't track that hardly at all, because I was looking for that in the department recap as well. So anyway, I just felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect, and I want to make sure that we are very clear that we are not exponentially increasing the offices of CEO just because we can, because we always have to keep the other eye on reserves.
Yes.
And so I want to make sure that we are clearly communicating that.
I appreciate that, Director Willie. And we could have been more explicit in the narrative. The narrative does have some pieces here, but maybe we could have said this is how much that is. It could have been a little bit more.
I mean, how difficult would it have been to take those and roll those back to the 23 and the 22, just to say, really, we're just repositioning some things here. So anyway, that was my initial thought.
No, but my question is, on those pages that have the numbers, would a footnote reference back to the narrative help? That's what I was trying to drill down to.
Yeah, it definitely would have helped. Well, because I think what we always do is we go in and we read the budget message, and we read all the narrative, and then we go to the numbers, and then we try and go back.
Well, I do that because I was trained that you got to read the narrative in order to understand the numbers. I hadn't approached it from looking at it from the numbers back to the narrative.
Yeah, I think what I do anyway is I read the narrative, I kind of log in stuff, and then I go, okay, where do I see that?
Okay.
And I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't see specifics.
Oh,
But anyway.
okay. Got it. Now I'm understanding.
Thank
At the same time, I don't think you get a clear picture of all the money spent on legal, for example, because one of the, probably the most expensive legal member is in the office of the COO and not in the legal part of the budget.
Right, right. So that might be a really good segue to introduce
No,
our
nope.
chief. Nope, not yet.
Got to see about other questions or comments, because I think all of this document is really, really good, but I wanted to give a particular shout out because I tagged the page and wrote great info on page 28. And it deals with, and it's not just 28, but leading through, up through 28, but especially these 3 paragraphs on 28 that help our community understand the nature of the Tualatin River, right? Because all rivers are not created equal. But often in our vocabulary, well, it's a river. Therefore, it's big and mighty and goes places. Well, the Tualatin River isn't mighty. So it's sensitive too, because, yeah, far more sensitive than others, and you really brought that to life.
And it's, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments from the Budget Committee. So Kathy and I were talking about maybe adding a sheet that talks about the financial changes. The purpose of all of this is because of the way we're doing cost allocation, so we're moving to cost centering. And then in future budgets, you're going to see, Kathy's ears are going to go, ugh, it's really a central services, sort of internal services model that then would allocate back to the fund. So all of these changes are to begin doing those cost-centering shifts. Because the reality is with the executives, it sort of depends who you get and which portfolio. One of the things that Mark and I talk a lot about is the reason you bring strength to whoever the next CEO is going to be is because they have had experiences managing multiple different portfolios in the organization. And that's where recruiting for the next CEO, it has to be someone that has the wide breadth of a utility. If you get just a business person, then you begin optimizing against money and you lose operations. If you get just an operations person, you lose the financial. So that's why we shifted to a portfolio type of management. I would really drive them crazy when I start mixing up their portfolios down the road. But it's really this very intentional thought about how do you prepare the next executors, the directors to move into executives positions, but we need people that have holistic experience. And it goes back to the board saw my blueprint for innovation, and what I talked a lot about is utilities change when the CEO changes, so you need to have the right type of CEO that can deliver on this watershed-based approach and deliver on these types of financial outcomes. So that's why you're seeing it, but I do appreciate that we should probably show the compass because we're moving costs from one area to another for specific purposes. Yeah, I appreciate that. So that's why you see the budget overall only going up 3.9%.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
That was kind of my disconnect. I was reading narrative that says we're only raising rates this and much and this and much, but I'm seeing in much of the expenditure side of things considerably more.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would just so you have to do a little extra work. I get that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. I appreciate that, though.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Other questions?
We
Okay.
didn't make you fall.
Well, welcome,
I
Jerry,
didn't mean to make you fall back, Jerry.
Get my water bottle.
We were talking about numbers, and attorneys always run when we start talking about numbers, okay?
Why I became an attorney.
Unless they're growing.
For the record, Jerry Linder, General Counsel, Clean Water Services. Good morning, Chair Harrington, members of the Clean Water Services Board of Directors, Chair Song, and the CWAC Budget Committee members. I first want to say, as I'm sitting out in the audience, I'm thinking how much commitment you all are making and taking time off, probably from work and having vacation, and it's just deeply appreciated, and it's very important to us, and thank you very much for your time. If you look at your budget book on page 171 to 173, that's where the legal budget is. And we'll go to the next slide. And I would love to say that if you look at the small budget of legal that actually went down, that it was because of my sharp pencil. But you already found out that I can't go there because it's mostly because my position has moved into the office of the CEO. So I can't take really any credit for that, but I do want to introduce who our department is. It's obviously, I'm the general counsel, but then, we're not quite ready for the next slide. The
person who is the other attorney that we have, that's our senior assistant legal counsel. And then we have a legal assistant, and we are soon adding a public records specialist that I'll talk about in just a minute. Next slide. So the different things that legal does, I'm not just going to read that to you, and frankly, that's just a very small sample of some of the main things we do. I want to highlight a couple things on there, though. I want you to understand what the proactive and practical solutions means. Many of you may think of attorneys as deal killers. I like to think of our department as deal makers. We help the departments get their work done. We make sure that it's within the protective bounds of the district. But we're there to help people and to be creative and to give them practical advice and also to be proactive in avoiding legal suits and claims, which we've been very successful over the years doing. The other thing I want to point out is going to outside counsel on occasion. Obviously, with just a two-person legal staff, we don't know everything. We practice 7, 8, 9 areas of law, but there are times when it's just a lot cheaper, frankly, to call an expert who practices in a particular area and can give us a quick answer. And they may be expensive, but it's cheaper than myself or another person spending half a day trying to figure out something we don't know much about. And obviously, if there's any significant litigation, which we've been fortunate to mainly avoid, that's something that we need an expert legal litigator who has some more time than our small department does. Next slide. So these are the sorts of budget things that are significantly different from last year. We already discussed bullet 1. Bullet 2 has actually come to the Clean Water Services Board of Directors for approval, and that was to add a function relating to regulatory compliance to the Office of the Legal Department. And that is not going to be me. Some of you already know, but I am going to be retiring from Clean Water Services and the practice of law on June 30th. It's all right.
That was just to put a point on it.
Yeah, to put a point on that.
That's both a happy sound and a sad sound.
Well, thank you. I guess after practicing 34 years, and I never was able to get in the game, I should probably just give it up.
Oh, good grief.
I mean, isn't it always funny that they call it the practice of law?
Things here.
No, thank you.
Wow, you really took the wind out of me there, Mr. Linder.
Well, I'm sorry. But we have, I announced it in lots of time because I knew it would be not easy to find a quick replacement or to train someone quickly. So we actually have hired Caroline Lobdell, and she is wonderful, and I'm sure you'll meet her soon enough. But we're going to start in May. She's going to come in. We're going to start training her before I go. Actually, already May, I guess, but the middle of the month. And so I think we'll have as smooth a transition as possible. And then the other change is the public records officer. That is a position that is going to be new to the legal department. It actually has been approved by the board, and it's currently being recruited for. I think it closes next Friday. And so hopefully we'll have that person on board pretty quickly. What they'll be doing is, now you can go to the next slide because it really relates to this.
Oh, okay.
It really relates to our records program, which in the past has really been distributed across the whole district, And so each department has its own responsibilities, and legal trains people on how to do what they're supposed to do. But it's not the best way to do it. I mean, Diane said, no, we really need to, we grew out of a small agency, but we're really big now, we're sophisticated, and we really need to have a better management system for our public records. I mean, we've been adequate. We haven't missed any requirements. We're very active on getting public records requests answered. Nevertheless, I think it'll be really great to have a person who has that responsibility to work directly with the departments to help them categorize their records and help with the retention schedules and when documents can be let go and which ones have to be kept for sure forever. So I think it's going to be a really good thing. And you notice that Oregon Records Management System, that's we actually have not had an official software package that we have ways of doing it, but this is actually a records program put together by the state of Oregon that is used by many municipalities that are similar in size to us. And we actually have already made that purchase. It's quite inexpensive, something around $25,000. So that's going to be a great thing that we'll train folks on, and they'll understand better how the whole system works together. Then the last couple things I want to mention, and when you see goal sharing there, but really it's things that improve our processes. Vendor contracts is a kind of a boring little legal issue, but it means a lot to the legal department because we spend a lot of time, you buy something and the vendor says, here's our form contract. And we look at it and we say, well, we can't, I mean, first of all, it has some state law provisions in it from the ORS. We can't destroy the records when you want us to because they're public records. We only have a certain level of confidentiality we can promise you, again, based on public records law. So all these things. So we kind of go back and forth on them. Everyone's a little different, but it tends to be sort of the same issues over and over. So we're going to come up with a template that'll just allow us to say, here's what we can live with, and we'll send it out, and we're going to make it balanced and fair. So I think that'll be a real improvement. And then finally, the notary public. I'm sure many of you have had documents notarized. Most of the documents that need to get notarized at Clean Water Services are real property documents, and that all flows through legal. And so those services, we have some notary publics, but it's been a little spotty as who's here and who's gone. And so we're going to bring that into actually a program where we'll always know who's available, and we'll do specific Clean Water Services training for those notary publics and decide which departments need one, which ones don't. So we're going to standardize that a little bit more effectively. Next slide. Oh, well, that's, I'm not sure why that's up there, but. Yeah, oh, there used to be a question slide in my packet, but I do have one number. It's fairly meaningless, but it's important. So with two people, well, we have something called.
You're making my head spin. You know, I don't deal with incongruity very well. It's not real useful, but it's meaningful.
Well, we have something called the legal queue, where we know every document that comes into legal for review, people can say, I need this in 5 days, this is urgent. And we always know then when we got the document, what's needed to be done on it, which department it's going to be in, right? We review it, and then it goes back to the department. And so for a while, nobody knew, where is that? I don't know, it's in somebody's office. Now, we always know where the documents are. We always know the schedule. And it's anywhere from an easement to a 38-page scope of work for an engineering firm. And so far this year, we've looked at 412 documents. That's a lot of documents for two people to process. But so that's my number.
That's a great practice. Not sure we have one here in the Washington County Agency. We do by departments,
Yeah,
but not across the whole org.
It's very effective. So any questions?
I know.
Oh, I was just going to say one observation, Jerry, and it's beyond your retirement date, but it's always, thank you. Yeah, I think it's always important to see what the cost would be if we contracted. And some of the positions you don't contract out because they're more administrative. But if we were to hire what you do, and you know the billing rate, it's about $300 an hour, that would be a lot higher than what your budget is. So it would be interesting when people ask the question, well, why don't you just contract that out? We don't for a very specific reason, a cost savings. But to the public, they never see that. So it's a postscript beyond my time and yours. I just think it would be nice for people to say, well, I see why we hire those folks. It costs a lot more money. Is that a fair statement?
Well, there's 2 points, I think. The first one you raised is very important. To be honest with you, it's hard to find, any of you are using outside legal service, it's hard to find 300 an hour now.
Yeah.
That used to be near the top. Now it's 400 to 600 with the kind of firms that have the expertise that we need. We can't go to solo practitioner in downtown Beaverton. I mean, we need people that are really experts in their field, and they're expensive. And the other point that I think is important is in getting those experts, you could not have them be internal to the district. I mean, if you were paying me $400 an hour, I don't know what our budget would be, but it'd be really big. And so the other service that we have as an internal in-house counsel is we're always available. You know, you're encouraged to call us, not like, oh, don't call legal, it's, you know, $450. So we're always there. You can ask us any question you want. And I think that doesn't really get reflected in everything, but it really gives the district so much more protection than, because I know cities that don't have in-house counsel and they do everything they can to avoid calling. Well, what if that was something that should have been handled and it was a legal problem? And that's part of our proactive nature, that we make sure that doesn't happen. We're involved, we're available.
So my question is about the records and information management person. Do you already have records retention schedules and archiving and such? So that's not a new thing that this person is going to have to set up?
No, not at all. We have a current public records officer, but she is also now in the purchasing department. She's been promoted. And so we have a person who is a part-time person who's filling in the records function. But yeah, we've always had retention schedules, and we have an official public records officer. So this new person will be doing that as a full-time job with that official title. Thank you.
Just a comment that for the size of the overall budget, I was shocked by how little money we spend on legal.
Thank you.
I have a question. So I appreciated how on the public records side, public records officer, you really helped remind me, at least, or bring to life the business reasons why having a public records officer is really business beneficial. I know at one time, when we approved it as the board of directors, I know then that I remembered why a chief compliance officer function was important. But I'm sorry, I really need the reminder of the overview of the nature of the business. And I might have read it in the narrative section, and I just need the reminder to go back and read those pages. Or could you bring it to life now, whichever is most efficient?
Well, I think the concept is to have a primary point of compliance. We have experts in the permitting area, experts at the plants, experts at the, stormwater. Annual report comes in from mostly the field operations folks. And so I think the idea is not that this person is going to be, do Bob Baumgartner's job in regulatory affairs. The new person will simply include it and incorporate it as part of the legal department as a organizer and a final signatory. But I don't know if Dan wants to add to that.
I really appreciate the question. You know, with the complexity of clean water services and all of the different laws that we have to comply with, because we're also a governmental unit. So we have the core function of compliance with regulatory compliance. We have BOLI, we have HR, we have safety, we have all of these requirements. So by wrapping it into the GC's position, it creates this person that can begin auditing and looking at all of our policies or procedures. I find that we need to make our policies and procedures more robust, and we need to make sure that the teams are implementing those policies and procedures appropriately. So it's really someone scanning the entire spectrum of compliance that Clean Water Services wants to do. Depending on what my findings are, the question becomes, often businesses will have two, right? They'll have a general counsel and they'll have a chief compliance officer that's separate. But what I find with those programs, they're often at odds with each other, so that's why I put them, that function together. But this is because of our size and because of our potential vulnerabilities as you get a lot bigger. I need to really have a focus on compliance. So the reason why legal is set up this way is the team that's in this budget, they do the day-to-day workflow for the organization as it relates to legal services. The general counsel and the person who's doing general counsel work and chief compliance officer work, they're as part of the executive suite because they're looking at these broader issues. I want to thank Jerry for all of his dedicated work to the district, and he's often had to do line legal services work as opposed to just his normal, what a general counsel should be doing for clean water services. So it's really getting us to the next level, and I really am thankful for Jerry's service. He is our first and only general counsel we have ever had at Clean Water Services. So,
And thank you for growing our business up,
Yes.
too.
Well, thank you for allowing me to serve.
I have a question for you, Jerry,
Sure,
and congratulations on your retirement.
thank you.
Just to follow up what you said, Diane, thank you, Mark. Teamwork. You said Jerry is the first legal counsel the CWS had. What was the history behind? I don't remember reading that in the
Sure.
historic. By the way, I always enjoy the history context you provide, but I didn't, since this is over 50 years. What was the
There is,
practice when you walked in?
yeah, there is a history. Great question. So County Council, Washington County Council, served as counsel for Clean Water Services, or then Unified Sewage Agency, which was probably not a bad thing when Unified Sewage Agency was a very small agency. But over the years, that became more and more of an issue, right? In fact, I'm surprised that it was ever done that way, because I can immediately see the legal conflicts. It's difficult to have two clients when you know, so if you have a legal issue, you bring it to county council, and they have a Washington County problem with it, that shouldn't focus in. It should be a Clean Water Services issue. So, but they just went along with that for a long time because it was efficient and it was relatively inexpensive. There was one person dedicated to Unified Sewage Agency, but ultimately the general manager, Bill Gaffey, in 1995 said, you know, this just isn't going to work. We're getting too big. We've got too many things going on. We can't always count on the county. And so that was when they established the general counsel position, and that I was fortunate enough to be hired for.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing that story. And the other question I had, I think I lost my page, but
171
170.
to 173.
Where did I lose it? Oh, there you go. Thank you. I think, could you quantify, I see a lot of numbers here, but I was wondering, I didn't want to make an assumption about the professional services or any of that. Could you quantify just how much we spent, CWS spent on outside legal counsel?
I do not have that number with me, but we keep close track of it. We as bills come in each month, we pay them, and we keep track of each firm and their services. So I can get back to you with that number.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I was wondering, reading your legal services, was there any settlement that offered, fundings that were offered out? And could you quantify that as well?
You mean in terms of dollar amounts for
Yeah,
settlements?
any settlement, legal settlements?
I'm trying to think if in this year we've got a couple open items that didn't settle. And getting my calendar years mixed up, but I don't think we've had anything.
No, I don't think so either, not in this fiscal year.
Yeah, so that's part of our proactive service to try to avoid that kind of thing.
So, for example, if there's a capital project that needs mediation, we have one that's going through that process. The capital budget actually gets charged for that legal services, so it doesn't stay within the legal budget. So right now, Jerry has $80,000 that's within this budget that's for professional services contracts. The other thing with the cost centering, we're trying to get a handle on, we have intellectual property that we manage, but that cost is distributed into other budgets. So we're really, the purpose of this legal services is to bring all of those costs into this as a cost center in the long run, so. But thank you for that question. Yeah, so this legal budget has other resources from capital and other operating programs. Yeah. So my intention is to cost center it all, so we can see it all. Yeah.
And I think I ask this question every year, so I'll ask again. And this is about the risk management. Now that you're outgoing, do you think the risk management or there should be a piece of this budget?
Well, risk management is in the budget under
Different.
business services.
We
But
can't hear you, Jack.
Yes, risk management is currently budgeted in a different department. The department is called Business Operations and Strategy. Thank you.
And legal works hand in hand all the time with risk. They handle sort of the day-to-day. There's a sewer overflow in a basement. It's not going to end up being a big lawsuit because it's $33,000. So it's a back and forth between risk and the homeowner as to what are legitimate expenses and so on. So legal doesn't get too involved, but we stay in contact and work together very closely.
I think my question was, do you think it makes, now that you're outgoing,
Okay.
this is a process improvement, does it make sense that budget piece to be in the legal service side of it, just to streamline it?
Yeah, I have no opinion on that. I mean, legal services at different agencies and different corporations incorporate all sorts of things. It's not unusual to have risk. It's not unusual not to have risk. It's, so it very much depends on really the managers as to how they want to organize that. I don't know that there's any particular downside or upside, other than, you know, for wherever you want to budget it, but it wouldn't change anything about how I work with risk management, or the new person will likely work with risk management.
And so our risk management program is more leaning towards the HR types of issues, right? Related to safety issues. But they also have the other operational piece of emergency management and helping us with the hazards mitigation. So it's an interesting program. At Clean Water Services, it's traditionally lived within the HR program because of that.
As with Washington County.
But it's a great question. Yeah, I have similar questions. So that's why the Chief Compliance Officer will be looking at these things.
Any further questions? Thank you, Jerry. Kathy, you have more numbers for us?
Yes, thank you, Terry. Chair Song. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Finance and Accounting Department budget. You can find those, the detail in pages 163 through 165 in the budget document. So this is giving you the overall budget numbers, $4.4 million budget proposed with 16 FTE, and you would think
Kathleen,
you would
could you-
see a reduction.
Kathleen, could you repeat the page
Oh,
number?
sorry, yes, I can.
It's on your agenda.
Yeah, pages 163 through 165 in the budget document.
Thank you.
No problem. So a proposed budget for 4.4 million, 16 FTE. You would think that our budget would go down, as we talked about my position moving out of here into the office of the CEO. But future slide, I will show you why there are increases on our budget side. There we go. So 16 FTE in accounting services. We do a diverse group of projects. We have accounting services, financial reporting. We do budgeting and CIP, planning and development administration. We do the utility billing and collections, and we also do debt management in our group. So some of the changes in that group, and talking about that 6% increase, so that my position was moved over into the Office of CEO, but we did add a position mid-year in '23 for a business systems analyst 2. So there's a partial budget in '23, but you see the full budget impact in '24, and that's why there's that increase. This is a succession planning, but mainly resiliency type position add for us. Right now, we have one individual that manages all of our business systems for us on the reporting and development side, and this would be a position that would support that, as we've added now the open SmartFlex utility billing, along with Questica budget and our Oracle system. So this will be supporting all those different, the administration of those applications and the reporting that comes out of those. And then on the material services side, there's an increase of about $126,000. That's an estimate on our shared billing service with Tualatin Valley Water District. So we pay for part of the operating costs on that billing system and their staff. So initiatives for our group. So as you may remember, last year we had a capital project out there. That was the implementation of partnership with TVWD of our utility billing system with Open SmartFlex. We went live on July 1st of this year in 2022. So in this next coming year, we're going to be updating our intergovernmental agreement with Tualatin Valley Water District, taking into account this new operating environment that we're in with a new billing system. We've also included about $500,000 in the budget this year in capital related to our phase 2 of that billing software. So the initial implementation was really a status quo, just get the accounts over and the ability to bill and collect quickly. Phase 2 would be adding some added benefits to the billing system, a better bill form, potentially looking at integration of Amanda, our permitting system, into our billing system, so some enhancements to that. And finally, we're involved in the asset management project and this is a district-wide multi-department initiative for the district, looking at how we do our CIP planning, how we account for our assets, and how we manage and renew our assets. So it's spanning all of the groups within, finance, engineering, construction, communication, the EATS group. So it's a wide-spanning initiative. On finances side, in the budget, we're looking at some of the enhancements we would do in our first year under our roadmap. And that steps include a development of a clear accounting of the district's assets and process to keep fixed asset costs information up to date. That CF effort includes the componentization and assignment of appropriate useful lives, documentation supporting the assets are still in operation, and proper disposal of assets that are no longer in use. So it's a multi-year initiative. This is the first year on our track on that. And with that, I open it for any questions.
Kathy should toot her horn. She and her team have taken on treasury services. And she worked, so Kathy and her team have taken over the treasury function. There is support from Jack Liang and his financial team to support her, but that was a big accomplishment this past year.
Thank you.
Yeah, going forward.
So is that the debt management?
No, so that was, the county used to provide our basically banking and investment services for us, and we moved those over at the end of last fiscal year. So this is a full fiscal year where we're doing our own treasury. So banking, procurement card, and investment.
And on the front page, you did talk about debt management.
Yeah, so we continue to do the debt management. So that's the continuing disclosure, payment of bond interest and principal payments, so that overarching debt management and forecasting for future issuances and refundings.
So what you're seeing play out in terms of questions here and in other forums is we don't live in the financial world. So we need you, the expert. You just give a term and you know what that means. But the rest of us don't know, what the heck is Treasury all about? What does it mean for the real work that you have to do? And that's what we need you to do more of for us.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure if right above debt management is utility billing and collections, and I wasn't sure if that was part of the collections issue or not.
No,
this
no.
is
So
part
on
of the
the, so
treasury
that would be,
piece.
we do our own billing for
And your
our
own
customers.
collections.
Yeah, and collection efforts on those.
There's a spike in professional services. Sorry, that's all right. There's a spike in professional services. Is that your actuarials, or what's going into that 115?
Let's see, let me
Not
think on
audit,
that one.
That's a separate line.
So it includes, we potentially could, well, we will have a single audit this year related to some ARPA funds that we received. So
And that's not under audit costs?
no, we include that in under professional services. The audit one is really the number we run from our contract with Moss Adams each year. So there's a piece for that. We also include money there for potential, there'll be a municipal bond issuance, so potential municipal advisor services. We do some levels of indirect rate development. At times, we've covered that within our budget.
Potpourri of a whole bunch of stuff. I didn't, yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
It spiked pretty good from what we've
Let me look at-
historically spent. Yeah.
What page again? 165.
165. Line item 52,240, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
5X change.
Yeah, from actual to budget, yeah.
Wait, no,
Yep, very small. 65. No, not 5X,
That's about right.
3X. Not quite
Yeah,
4.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
52,240?
Are you talking about from
52,240.
33 to 115? Is
Yeah.
that what you're- Yeah.
Right, just wondered why it went so high. I didn't know what it was.
52,495, or
This
professional
is-
services?
Yeah, it's the same as the previous.
The same as the
budget.
previous year.
No,
that's
it
the
isn't.
budget. That's
The
the
actual,
budget.
they're talking about the actual.
I'm not talking
Oh,
about
the actual.
Yeah, what are you actually spending?
Yeah, so we budget in there for potential of single audit, rate adjustment, indirect rate analysis, municipal review. We put money in there to cover.
Plan for the worst,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
usually less than the worst happens.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So that's carried forward.
Yeah, so we keep that balance in there. It gives us flexibility if we need to go in and do any sort of analysis, rate analysis, audit functions. For instance, this year we picked up, as we closed out the year, we picked up the utility billing audit for the new system. They did it early on in the year, so we wouldn't have to deal with it at fiscal year end. So it gives us flexibility in the different types of audits we might encounter.
So they budget what they need, but they only spend what they need to, so, yeah. So the other reason for moving the CFO out of this budget was, again, because we're so lean, often what happens is Kathy, as the CFO, ends up doing workflow that should be done by the teams here. So we're really trying to be more mindful, and Erin is nodding, yeah. So that we need to make sure our programs are adequately staffed for the flow of work that they have and not rely on the CFO and other executives to do line work. So that's really the reason for these shifts. So this allows us to see it.
So, yeah, I just got a couple of questions. It looks like you, in looking at the, on page 164, the classification of those, looks like you retitled a bunch of job positions. Because there's a lot of
Yes.
movement in there, but there's only a +1, so.
Yeah, so yes, that was part of that class and comp on our represented employees. And our movement towards the ability for position to be recognized for training and promotion and growth.
Yeah, I didn't compare the salary grades, but I'm assuming they stayed somewhere in there close. So following up, so I think you answered the question of the bank service charges over the last couple of years have significantly gone up. So that's because we took that part
Yes.
under our control.
Yeah, so yes.
And then what is other governmental services? I mean, it sounds like kind of a.
So that is where our contract with Tualatin Valley Water District resides. That's the majority of that $1.5 million. But we pay the county for filing and archiving of some of our documents. So it's really those other governmental services.
Okay. That's good.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Kathy. Jack?
All right. Good morning, Chair San. Good morning, members of the Budget Committee. For the record, my name is Jack Liang, Chief Business Operations Officer. I am very excited to be presenting you the information for the next 4 departments within Clean Water Services. And I also want to pre-note that I am one person trying to present you information for these 4 departments and telling the stories, but the information and the stories you will be hearing is really made up by all the staff that are within these departments. So thank you. And we will start with Business Operations and Strategy Department. We can go to the next slide, please. So the information for this department within the proposed budget starts on page 145, just for reference. And this department's total budget has an increase of 15% at the total level, roughly $1.2 million. The personnel services cost increased 26%, roughly $800K of that. Most of this year's change are due to the full-year reflection of the pay structure updates, as you have heard previously. And also, there were a couple reorganizations of strategist positions into the strategies program that has happened this year. There was only one position added within this department, as you can see, from 20 to 21. And that one position is the Senior Risk Management Analyst, which is for succession planning and continuity of business operations within the risk management area. The year-over-year increase were primarily that you can see, as Commissioner Rogers has pointed out, your actual in the past years seems to be quite a bit shorter than the budgeted amount. So those year-over-year increases were primarily due to the continued reorganization of positions into this the one strategist program that's within this department. So over the last couple of years, that one program within this department was relatively new. There used to be strategist positions embedded in other departments or reported directly to the CEO. And then since we created the strategy development and performance management program, slowly we have moved those positions into this program. We will go into a little more detail in that. On the material and services side, it increased by 8% or $360K. The entirety of this increase was due to increased insurance cost. So one of the things that we did this last year is risk management did a reevaluation of our wastewater resource recovery facilities. And the valuation of those facilities has tremendously increased from the insurance appraisal perspective. So we are reinsuring those facilities. And on the surface, it is costing us more money, but financially, we are actually providing better protections for our very important assets. And in addition to the facilities appraisal, we also added the cybersecurity coverage. We are in the process of adding the cybersecurity coverage. It's in this budget, and it will kick in the new fiscal year.
Is that replacement? Is that a replacement valuation or just the overall valuation of the facility?
It is a replacement valuation. Next slide, please. And as you can see, this is the organization of this department. There are 3 programs within this department. Under the business opportunities and operations, that is our procurement, as well as business opportunities. And there are 8 FTEs within this program. And then there are 3 FTEs within risk and insurance management. That includes the one added Senior Risk Management Analyst, FTE. For the strategy development and enterprise performance, there are 10 FTEs with strategist roles in various different functions. And that particular program is a strategy support function for all departments within the district. And you will hear some of those partnering projects that this program is doing in the later slides. Next slide, please. And the major driver for this particular department is actually investing in talent and strategy for the organization. And you can see that we are following the organization's compensation structure strategy, and part of that, all of that pay structure is reflected in the budget dollars. In addition to that, we are rebaselining training and learning for this team. So there's some slight increase in the training dollars for this particular department. And as a new program, we continue to develop the strategy team's roadmap, and then that increase the team's effectiveness in facilitating CWS overall strategy. That particular activity does not cost additional dollars. It is just something I like to highlight as a significant work for this particular department. Next slide. So here are some examples and on the progress of our strategic initiatives. Starting off at the top level, the climate action plan, we have completed the strategic roadmap and have reviewed that at the last board learning session. The next step of that is to realizing the strategic roadmap on the climate action plan by developing the phase 1 project portfolio, so we can actually turn the strategy into projects and start executing on some of these projects. And the strategy team's role is a facilitation role. It is actually a significant effort that goes across the district in every department. And then the next is managing the CWS risk portfolio. You have heard that we did a reappraisal and evaluation of the water resource recovery facilities, and then we also added cybersecurity insurance to the district's portfolio. In addition to that, we have developed a clean water insurance company, trying not to use the acronym there, Clean Water Insurance Company's strategic plan, which is the captive insurance company that service clean water services insurance needs, and then we will continue to update and continue to develop that strategic plan. In the business opportunities and process optimization area, we are looking at the internal opportunities to improve business processes. We actually do have a dedicated team and a dedicated program that will work with every department on their processes and to see if there's any efficiency gain that we can find. Is there any better way that we can do, either to increase our throughput or increase the quality of the work that we're doing. In the last year, that program has conducted evaluations with our fleet management program as well as the accounts receivable program, and both of those are well on its way to process improvement. What I'd like to highlight is the last bullet on this slide is the external opportunity to increase non-rate revenue. That was one of Mr. Farr's questions is, do we actually have all of the pressure on the rate-related revenue, or what are we doing to look at non-rate revenue to help relieve some of those rate and fee pressures? We actually have a dedicated program that are looking at all the opportunities. And again, this is also a program that partners and supports all the departments, like the renewable natural gas project. It's going to happen in our water resource recovery facilities. This is a program that actually supports the negotiation with Northwest Natural and really looking at the business documents and ensuring that we are protecting clean water services business interest. So I wanted to highlight that. Next slide. And then you have heard about the roadmap. You actually have the department roadmap and program roadmap right in front of you. So for the roadmaps, we do break it down into 3 different levels. At the strategic level, those are the initiatives like the climate action. It goes across the board, goes across the district. And then at the department level, it's a little more departmental focused. Usually departments work on them themselves, and then we have a dedicated team to facilitate that development within each department. And then our program roadmap is even further into the department's details that goes into the programs. And we have a dedicated team to work with the departments to really help educate, train, and facilitate really those conversations within the department to develop the roadmaps. And you have seen some of those outcomes and the product in front of you. On the cost of service study, which is also not unfamiliar for you, we have reviewed the board and reviewed with the board and reviewed with the city representatives on the cost of service study. And then what we're doing is that we are continuing with the data collection and the additional financial planning pieces we have getting a good understanding of our cost. Actually don't have a Kim Baylor or excellent financial strategist formula in front of me, but basically you have the rate revenue, you have the non-rate revenue, and then you use that as a formula to plan out for our future rate projections. So that's the portion of the work that have not been completed yet, and we're continuing on that. And then last but not least, quite importantly, we are continuing to enhance our financial reserve policy to bring more clarity, bring more transparency into our reserve plans. Next slide. For the integrated project planning work, we have completed the phase 1 work, and that is really also a district-wide initiative to bring all the different departments who are doing planning projects, no matter if it's gray infrastructure, green infrastructure, inside the facilities or outside the facilities, to really have a little more integrated approach to our project planning. And then that design work has been completed, and then we're developing training and tools to support the departments in utilizing the new training and tools and a new way of project planning. And then in that's also related into the project management and strategy delivery area. Clean Water Services has done a great job in project management in certain areas, and then has room to improve in other areas. We are hoping to support the entire district in more integrated project management, so the information and the progress of our projects are both transparent, but also at the same time are efficiently managed. And the pilot project portfolios that we're going forward with is the climate action project portfolio, which you have heard, as well as the board initiatives. We're working with Diane and Mark Jockers on managing each one of those items as a project, and then ensuring that we're delivering on those initiatives on a regular basis.
It's because strategy is a hallucination unless you implement it, right? And that's what this is intended to do, is to drive implementation.
Chair Harrington, do you have a question?
Yes, and I may be the only one. I'm feeling slow. I know this is really important, and I know you've done a lot of work. And that's where I'm panicking a little bit because I'm afraid I'm not appreciating the significance of this milestone, okay? So I'm embarrassed.
Oh, no need to be.
You've worked really hard across the whole agency to develop a strategic plan approach and all these program areas. I'm a little embarrassed that I don't have a full appreciation for the significance of completed phase 1. And maybe I really do understand that you've broken each of the areas into multiple implementation phases, and now from a planning standpoint, you've completed phase 1 across all of them. So I don't have this clear yet, and
Let me
I'm panicking about it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the significance of having a pilot set. So you're doing everything great. I mean, great, excellent. I fell off the wagon.
Yeah, so the integrated project planning, this is a very specific phase to make sure that our conveyance engineering, as well as our NSES ecological engineering programs, are in alignment with each other. So he's actually highlighting a very specific capital delivery project planning, and we call that integrated project planning. The team also brought on the WRRD team so that they can also utilize the aspects of what was learned and how you integrate across different disciplines, because our solutions are now multidisciplinary and they need to function as multidisciplinary teams. So the second bullet is more directed at how are we going to have accountability to our roadmaps and our strategy. And that's what the project management strategy delivery bullet is about. We're developing that infrastructure to be able to show performance, because I've told the team, all of this is a hallucination if we can't show and deliver that we're delivering on it.
So can you help me relate to the gift of these 3 documents together, right? I know for the detail sections, it talks about how this is put into practice in the departments. But you've also given us what the strategy involves. Implementing the strategy means all of these program roadmaps,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And how do I haven't cracked this open yet, but I appreciate the gift of it. Can you help me understand what this is? How it's a gold box versus a plain vanilla box?
It is the detail.
Precious metal box
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
a newspaper print box.
So the budget is how we're going to spend our money that annual, right?
Yep.
And you can see how we spent our money in the past. These documents document the things that we're going to accomplish. Yeah. In the past, they resided in people's heads, right? Now we're putting it on paper
Okay.
to deliver on them.
And am I correct in understanding that these things, they're pieces of the program roadmaps that some of business services touches on, and also some of utility operations?
Yep.
It brings those two business organizations together.
Together,
Correct.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Am I the only one who's benefited from this conversation?
Yeah, everybody else understood.
Okay.
No, I'm teasing. I'm fooling with you. Everybody benefited.
I think what happens too is we get into detail and then we go up. And we get into detail and we go up. So we kind of, I find myself getting, wait a minute, where am I here? And that may have been a little bit of what's happening to you, Catherine.
Well, because I know with Logan's interim title with utility operations, I know he can speak to me about all kinds of pipes and conveyance and treatments and chemicals and biological properties. Jack, with business services, can really speak to a lot of how the business nature of doing this work. But I was struggling with the whole roadmaps. So I think I'm getting it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and your question and comments are very valuable to us. So if it may be helpful is that the programs are actually at finer details in compared to the department. So each department has multiple programs, and they are actually integrated between the department roadmaps and program roadmaps. As we are continuing to build out our roadmaps, this is our first step, draft of it, so we will. Oh, absolutely.
Hey, Jack, I have a fairly mundane, detailed question here, just because I worked with the natural systems folks. In your integrated project planning, did that have to include like software modifications like TerraTrack to make it talk to your project planning software and that level of detail, or do they work side by side?
So it,
Can I answer that? So not yet. We're trying to get the people piece
Okay.
solved, right? So it's culture and mindset. And then the question becomes, how do their systems? So they're doing a really great job lining out the projects where they are truly going to act as multidisciplinary teams, and then which projects are actually separate from that. Yeah. So this really sets out a project management system for them. Yeah.
So, and additionally, it would apply to the projects that you are referring to in the future. The phase one, as you see on screen, is actually focused on the gray and the green infrastructure.
The people,
yeah.
focusing on the people.
And the people, yeah.
So, can I go back to slide number 58?
Yep.
So, business operations and strategy, is one department. Is there a department roadmap that's business operations and strategy, or would there be one for each of these blue boxes?
So there will be a program roadmap for each one of these blue boxes.
Yep.
And then you are getting to the detailed questions is with the department roadmap, it was last year's effort. So we did a department roadmaps last year and then did program roadmaps this year, and then we're going to update them going forward. So in the department roadmaps, you won't find one specific for business operations and strategy, but you will find one for business services department as a whole. And going forward, as we update, we're planning on or building out additional departments as we did this restructuring of business services this year.
So Chair, to help, so for instance, business opportunity and operations, they have a program roadmap on page 15, right? So risk and insurance management, they have a roadmap on 111. Yeah, so that's how that's building. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got it.
All right, so I think we're back to that was my last slide. So business services by the numbers slide is where we're going to. And we already started the questions for this department. Any other or additional questions for this particular department? Yeah, go ahead.
Are there any areas where Clean Water Services is self-insured, or do you insure externally? Can you just share with me where you self-insure?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that Clean Water Insurance Company is a captive insurance company that is a component unit of Clean Water Services, and we do a great deal of self-insure within that particular area before we go out. So that company does two things. One, for the areas of risks, like currently it's cybersecurity, we're looking into that, the dental, as well as vision coverages for the district. We're covering that coverage within the Clean Water Insurance Company itself. And then for the higher risk items like the property, like the like the property damages and casualty, and the medical insurance area where we usually experience higher payout, we would do a reinsurance program and purchase insurance through that company. But at the same time, we are using that company to kind of adjust our deductibles. So really the business strategy from that is we can actually control our own deductible level and decide on how much risk do we want to take within the organization to kind of help us manage our premiums with the additional insurance that we bought outside. So that's in a nutshell, a quick information for our insurance landscape. So, thank you. Good question.
Can I go back to your point about having experience with natural systems, and now as you're a member of CWAC and now in our budget committee, from your lens, your viewpoint, are we doing okay in terms of our documentation on the value of the natural systems to the district, to the ratepayer?
That's a very big question.
Well,
and just as
it goes to, I think, the value of having someone of your experience who is a ratepayer, who had the professional background prior to your retirement. Just it's a gift for us.
Well, thank you. I'm still wrapping my arms around all that is Clean Water Services because I knew this one slice of the pie, and it's a very big agency with a lot of functions. And my initial reaction from just a really brief time so far on CWAC is I'm just so impressed with the integration of the strategies and the programs and how you can't always, you mentioned a little bit ago that even in this meeting today, we're going 30,000 feet and then on the ground, 30,000 feet and on the ground. But in my previous experience in other governments of various sizes, it hasn't been this easy to connect all those dots. And I just want to give kudos for that. And in terms of natural systems, I have a few things that I just really interested in personally on CWAC, which mostly is water supply and the Tualatin, it's over allocation. And how the heck can it take 10 days for a water molecule to just go that distance, So, I'm still really coming up the learning curve, but so far I'm impressed, and I don't think I directly answered your question.
No,
but
you did.
That's as
indeed,
far as
and
I've
then
got
some.
so far.
Well, and before we break for lunch, real briefly, and I don't mean to hold up your questions, but for our lay people on the budget committee versus board of directors, Mark, Matt, Alex, Terrence, you've been on the budget committee for at least 2 years.
Just 2 today.
This,
It's my second time.
that's all? Mark? First time. Elaine's first time. Well, welcome on board the beautiful ship, the innovative ship, Clean Water Services. We're happy to help you. Almost 40 years. This is fifth, third. So is it easier this year?
For me, it is.
It's easier this year for me. This is my fifth, it gets easier.
Yeah, and it's really cool. And I'm really excited about all the accomplishments, so.
It's my 31st. I think it's getting easier.
Mark,
So-
you have to jump in. Huh?
I know. But I want to take a pause here because it is lunchtime. I also want to acknowledge that we have 5 more departments that were supposed to be done before lunch. So Jack will be back to do
No,
the
no,
other.
they're not. They come back until 1:25.
Right, but there's 3 more departments that Jack has, and then Regional Utility Services Department.
Oh.
We will come back and we will pick up and try to finish out the things for scheduled in the morning. So what I think we have for lunch is in the cafeteria room over here. It's a self-serve lunch there, and we'd like to be back here at 1:10. If we could do that, okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Break for lunch.
Hey, Jack, if you got a minute, let me,
Did I lose my pen? What did I do with my pen?
Right in front of you?
No, blue one.
Sorry.
No, I had to get the black one out because I managed to lose a blue one.
Well,
What came in? Hopefully I didn't talk